Hello, good evening and welcome ladies and gentlemen to another round of exciting and absolutely awesome action in the one and only Just Two Idiots Championship Series, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. That's right, we're back for another round of racing action in Season 12, and it being our penultimate round in the LMP2 Championship today. For round number 9 of 10, we've remained in the US of A, but made our way all the way to the northern side of the west coast, and we're here at the Sonoma Raceway. Previously known as the Infinium Raceway or Sears Point Raceway, it is a circuit that has had a tumultuous history that aligns with its number of name changes, but one thing that hasn't changed over the course of its extensive history is a circuit that over 57 years has been renowned for its elevation changes, its blind apexes, and its mixture of sweeping corners and extended straights. To do well around here, you've really got to be brave and also think inside the oval, as the saying goes, because this is one of those circuits whereby it's got no time for anybody who's not ready to commit to each and every corner. With most of these corners requiring you to commit muscle memory as well as mental memory to the fray, it means for our drivers here, the smallest of mistakes can prove costly, but they're absolutely right, and there's nothing quite as satisfying as taking a win at Sonoma. But where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this post-round broadcast from Circuit Siders. Tune in tonight and catch up with all the racing action which occurred as of Wednesday the 15th of April 2026, but we're bringing it to you as if it were live today, this Thursday the 16th of April. Therefore, we do not know who's going to be the fastest in practice, which is currently going on in the background, nor the upcoming qualifying session, or most importantly, where all the points are paid in the race. And with only 2 rounds left and a championship that could be wrapped up today, well, there's everything on the line and we don't want to miss a single thing. But where exactly are we on YouTube? Well, you can tune in and catch all the racing action on a weekly basis on youtube.com and search for Paul Walsh Productions or PWP, and you can catch it all there. And in the content booth, you have myself. My name is Paul Walsh, and I shall be your commentator for today, indeed the entirety of the season, as we begin to gradually close our way towards the very end of the season. And in terms of our schedule for today, times in Eastern Daylight Time, EDT, or Universal Coordinate Time -4, UTC -4, as we can see in approximately around about 8 minutes time at 10 past 10 this evening, we'll be heading onto the circuit for our penultimate qualifying session, 20 minutes in duration. All drivers out there with their 6 final laps available, and who exactly is going to set the fastest time for pole position, after which we take a brief breather before returning to make our way to the grid for our final Grand Prix race of the season, and that will be at 25 to 11 this evening, 60 minutes of racing action, and we look forward to seeing who exactly will take victory, and whether Knotavin in particular can make it 9 in a row since the start of the season. But of course, we need to introduce the formal title for this round, and sponsored by Simply Steve, it is none other than the Steve's Super Sonoma Special. What a brilliant name there. Good old bit of alliteration there, and a huge thank you to Simply Steve for sponsoring this round of racing. We very much look forward to seeing who exactly is going to feel special emerging from Sonoma. Without further ado, let's set the scene and bring you up to speed with all the racing that occurred last time out and exactly how the standings stand after 8 rounds of racing. So as we begin, we take a look back at our calendar, and goodness me, have we made our way around the globe. But now we are into our final run. It is the American triple header that sees the season to a conclusion, and we are into the second of the 3 rounds. It's round number 9, and indeed we're here today at the Sonoma Raceway's Sportscar alternate layout. Last time out, we began our American triple header to wrap up the season at Sebring International in the US state of Florida. Indeed, we've been to Florida once with our round number 2 visit there for the Miami Extended Marina Loop and the Miami International Autodrome, but when we returned to Florida, what exactly did we get to see? Well, at the very front of the field, it was an exciting race for victory. It came down to 2 drivers, one of which you probably guessed, given the fact we've already alluded to the fact he did take the victory, and Knotavin, the championship leader, went into the round knowing that he's overcome everything, whether it be contentious moments at Kota, or alternatively a spin at the start of Magny Core, and then being able to launch his way forward with rain aiding him. Well, last time out, it was a straight-up fight between him and Squilliam. Squilliam had not been on the grid for a couple of rounds, but returned, and if you looked at qualifying, well, it looked like it was going to go Knotavins' way. He took pole position by almost 8 tenths over Squilliam, one of the largest margins of the season, and in the race, he seemed comfortable, gradually gapping Squilliam. However, there was a twist, and during the one stop, the oil drivers were expected to make for fuel, what we got to see was that Squilliam had a 6-second faster stop, and it meant it brought him out in front with just 17 minutes to go. And in those final 17 minutes, Knotavin absolutely hounded Squilliam non-stop. And in the end, with 7 minutes left in the race, he was able to find his way past with a daring move heading towards Le Mans Bend. And that was when Knotavin took the lead, and he gradually gapped Squilliam for the rest of the race, taking the win in the end by almost 7 seconds. But you had to be there to believe it. It was an incredible conclusion to what was a race that seemed to be all wrapped up, and Squilliam completely caused it to be blown wide open was a superb piece of fuel-saving strategy. So Squilliam in the end was your runner-up last time out, and indeed it was for him a day where he almost managed to beat Knotavin, but it seems though Knotavin had that final 5% that everybody else hasn't quite been able to find, but nonetheless he definitely was daring to try and fight for that move all the way to the very end. But who exactly then finished third on the podium? Well, it's our sponsor for this round. It was simply Steve, just beating Jen to third place in qualifying by 300ths of a second. In the early stage of the race, it looked as though it was going to be a three-way fight for third place between Simply Steve, Jen, and also Cat Daddy. However, as time went on, what we got to see was that whilst Cat Daddy and Jen were constantly threatening Simply Steve, they became more of an issue to each other rather than Simply Steve, and he was gradually able to open up a gap, which after the pit stops, it was able to open up even further, and he controlled the narrative for that third place, taking the final podium spot by 10 seconds, although he had no answer for the top two. And there are also some other headlines from what Sebring, including, of course, a brilliant battle through the field for Emi Dust, given the fact he was involved in a lap 1 turn 10 incident with Cat Daddy, and he put together an absolutely brilliant recovery drive, although the irony being the fact that when he would go back to battling for 5th place with Cat Daddy, the two would have contact once again, and unfortunately that contact would see the demise of Cat Daddy, and it would be Emi Dust who would bring on home that 5th place on the road, and therefore it really was one of those moments whereby I think both drivers afterwards had to have a little bit of a chat, and the stewards definitely took a look at what happened between them both early on in the race and at the very end of it. We also got to see a great race-long battle for the bottom half of the top 10 between Nick Squared, DC, Urko and Pancakes, with all four drivers having their ups and downs, and it really was a thriller wherever you looked at Sebring, and we can expect even more of that today. But given the fact we are here at Sonoma today, well, let's introduce our host circuit in full. Here's a Sportscar alternate layout of the Sonoma Raceway, located near the town of Sonoma in Sonoma County of the US state of California. 17 corners at its core, in fact 18, let's be correct there, and a huge thank you to iRacing.com, not just for the brilliant simulator, but the absolutely fantastic track maps contained within it. And indeed, these track maps really help us bring to life a circuit that otherwise we'd just look at on paper. Now, the only problem with a two-dimensional image, it doesn't ram-pack all the elevation changes into the image. We don't have quite a three-dimensional map, and therefore we won't dwell too long on this circuit map. We'll bring you some onboards in qualifying to ease your appetite when it comes to understand the Sonoma Raceway. But what you do need to know is that this circuit is absolutely packed full of sweeping bends, and also a good number of hairpins as well, and some scintillating straights. And so drivers were all the way across the start-finish line and up towards turn number 1. We emphasise up towards turn number 1 because it's a gradual uphill descent as you go into turn 1, and then all the way up to turn number 2. With a blind rise to the left-hander giving way to a sharp right-hander that's blind at the apex, and it's slightly downhill into turn number 3, before turns 3 and 4 are a repeat of turns 1 and 2, but the gap between the apexes is much closer, so drivers make the way up to a blind summit at turn number 4 once again. Get that right and not go to the grass, they'll make the way downhill in towards turn number 5. A sharp 100-degree right-hander, where it's all going to be about avoiding the off-camber, sending the car wide, and as they come out of there, it'll be flat out through turn number 6, and into the sweeping downhill off-camber bend at turn number 7, which will see our drivers make the way onto the drag strip, which Sonoma is just as much known for as it is known for its road courses. But onto the drag strip they'll go briefly, because then they'll go for the kink of 8 to leave it and make the way up towards the hairpin at turns 9 and 10. We're going to see our drivers definitely run wide there, and that's by design, given the fact there's plenty of runoff area and you are legally allowed to use the runoff area. It is not an off-track, and the stewards will not be penalising drivers who use that runoff area, and you'll see them make the way for the double right apex to turn 9 and 10, while making the way into the sweeping back section of turns 11 through to 16, where it's all about direction change and being committed to go as close as possible to full throttle, if not hold the throttle pinned all the way throughout. And after that, it's then the run down towards the hairpin at turn number 17, the corner where you can see plenty of overtaking action, but they come back on themselves on 18 at the kink to complete lap and do it all over again, or to finally see that checker flag. Indeed, Sonoma, one of those circuits where you've got to have your wits about you, and this is going to be a huge test of consistency, as well as it will be one lap pace. But just before we make our way back to circuit side, a quick reminder of the rules, in case you've forgotten them. Car setup-wise, this is an open setup championship, although drivers are required to drive the Dallara P217 LMP2 machine, with its wonderful Gibson 4.2-litre V8 engine, providing 603 brake horsepower in a mid-engine rear-wheel drive configuration. Qualifying-wise, an open qualifying format shall be used, which means all drivers can go out onto the circuit together at any given point in time over the course of the 20-minute session, albeit we should point out that beyond their outlap, drivers have 6 flying laps available to set their qualifying time. So it means that they do come into the pit, and then they make their way back out, we immediately take that second out lap as one of their flying laps. So therefore, they've really got a limited number of laps to set their qualifying time. And with the lap length round here being the best part of just shy of 1.5 minutes, the qualifying session is going to go quite quickly for those who want to get the laps done immediately. So you might need to be a little bit tactical. Now, when we do go racing for the Grand Prix race format, the race shall commence via a double foul rolling start, as is a tradition of LMP2 racing. There are no mandatory pit stop requirements, which means drivers have the choice of how they want to go about the pit stop strategy. Normally, the one stop is the way to go in these 60-minute races, but never say never. Somebody may try to do a no stop. Indeed, you never know whether someone's going to change tyres or not. Now, each driver has 2 fast repairs available should they need to use them, and the driver will receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 16 or more instant points. If they double that and get to 32, they will be disqualified, but we haven't seen that thus far, and all race shooting shall be conducted post-race. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we make our way back to circuit side, and as we do, well, just before we do make our way into the qualifying session, let's bring you up to speed with regards to the championship standings after 8 rounds of racing, and we begin with the overall Drivers' Championship, and here we can see Knotavin leading the way for night racing on 236 points to 206 of TonLo. Now, for those of you who are quite astute, you may be noticing that gap has shrunk when it should have grown theoretically, given the results last time out. So how do we explain that? Well, we are now including both drop scores over the course of the season. Every driver gets 2 drop scores over the 10-round season, and therefore, with the drop scores included, Knotavin leads by 30 points. So it does mean he can wrap up proceedings today, and all Knotavin needs to do today is score a clutch of points. So long as he takes some points in this round, he will become your champion-elect going into round number 10 next time at the Crown Jewel race at Road America. And with TonLo not on the grid as we're to understand it as well, that does in theory, so long as Knotavin's on his best behaviour and does secure some points, he is guaranteed to be champion-elect, and it will mean that unless he has some very erratic behaviour, let's say, in our season finale, he will not be losing that title. So it means Night Racing driver has no pressure on him theoretically today, but the only pressure he'll create for himself is the right to see if he can go the distance and make it 10 out of 10 this season for victories. So TonLo for BDS Racing not on the grid, but he'll stay in second for now, but Cat Daddy will inch closer, therefore, for playing race cars. Although last time out for Cat Daddy, it definitely was one of those rounds where, understandably, many would say that things didn't quite work out, and it wasn't just because of the contact with Etme Dust at the end of the race that saw him push back to 7th place and therefore lose out on some valuable points. But over the race distance, whilst he was able to put a degree of pressure onto Jen, and particularly at the start of the second stint, we saw him all over the back of the Night Racing driver. He could not find a way through. He did go for some quite daring moves, but when I caught up with him after the race, I did ask him what happened to his pace, and he said that because of the moves he tried, he gradually started to run out of pace towards the end, plus also the fact he didn't want to overcommit to a move and risk going for a 50-50 that could see himself and Jen in contact. So it's really good to catch up with Cat Daddy, and I did appreciate his openness with regards to what happened, but he definitely enjoyed himself out there with those battles. Nicolator sits the best part of 7 points behind for Nick Square, just ahead of teammate Beaver. Now, do we have them both back on the grid today? No, it is still Nicolator, so Beaver will lose some more ground, but Nicolator's always one to watch out for. Even if he was fighting for the bottom half of the top 10 last time out, he definitely put on a good performance battling with the likes of DC. Speaking of whom, is in 6th for Bong Life Motorsport, and the Bong Life team are gradually moving their way upwards. They are on a high, and, well, of course, what with it being 420 day this coming weekend, ladies and gentlemen, well, the team, they'll definitely be celebrating that in style, as the team name would suggest. Simply Steve sits in 7th, then our sponsor for today, the Speed Squad driver at 150 points. He continues to move up the rank and file, 5 ahead of Pancakes for SimCity Racing, and in Speed Squad's Etme Dust moving to 9th there with some important points obtained, and 144, only 2 ahead of Biker Pilot. The 3.8 Racing drive falling back down to the bottom end of the top 10, but just ahead of Garlic Dog in their brilliant battle to be inside the top 10. And the playing race cars driver had a bit of a difficult day last time out at Sebring, whereby the circuit and his car definitely did not gel together, and he'll be hoping for a more straightforward day today. Omega sits 12th for 3.8 Racing, also hoping to try and break back into the top 10, but is the further part of 8 points adrift, but is 4 ahead of Gem for Night Racing, who with that very impressive performance last time out, bringing on home what was none other than the 4th place finish. Well, now moving back into 13th, and can she find a way back into the top 10 before the season is done, given she's back here today? Urko sits 14th for Bong Life Motorsport on 120, and really ends the run of the leading group of drivers in 14th, because it is then the best part of almost half the points to get to Squilliam for Vision Motorsports, who many would argue, if he'd been able to make more rounds this season, could he have been right towards the top? Could he have been challenging Knotavin on a more regular basis? Well, that's a big what-if question, but I think the answer would be yes to that. But meanwhile, what we have to take reality is that he hasn't been able to, and therefore he's just ahead of AJ at the moment, with Pebble on 17th place and 41 points, and almost double the points of Corn Dog for Corn Hub Motorsports. Next, Vision Motorsport Spook Dubs and Spring Flower, the privateer, debutant last time out, of course, completing your top 20. And outside the top 20, not to be forgotten about, we've got a few more drivers out there, including Black Bob, the privateer there from Jamaica, also Paper Bag, the Scuderia DNF driver in 22nd, Sector sits 23rd ahead of Sassy, and then we do have Dickinson and Gabay around the standings there, and Gabay with the retirement on his debut race last time out, unfortunately not picking up any points, and perhaps hoping for a bit more towards the end of the season, although unfortunately not able to make this round here at Sonoma. Meanwhile, in the Teams Championship, what we can see here is that Night Racing lead the way still on 433 points, and with both drivers on the grid last time out, and bringing on home a first and a fourth, 12th, where it's definitely given them a bit of a comfort gap to playing race cars who, by comparison, had a harsher round with a 7th and 11th, meaning they have gradually dropped some points versus their leaders. Remember, there are no drop scores in the Teams Championship. Every point matters in every round, and Nick Squared, meanwhile, with only what was none other than Nicolator on the grid, well, it does mean they've fallen back a bit further in 3rd place and are at risk of being caught by Bong Life Motorsport, who are now only 26 points behind in 4th place. Speed Squad are also on the chase there, so we do have a growing fight for the final spots from 3rd all the way to 5th inside that top 5, with 3.8 Racing would fancy their chances, and then we do have a sizable gap of none other than what is, I do believe, 69 points there to BDS Racing. So whilst it's been a nice season at certain points, not looking nice at the moment, and it's SimCity Racing 8th place ahead of Vision Motorsports, with Corner Hub Motorsports completing that top 10 ahead of Scuderia DNF. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that's a rundown of the standings coming into this round, and one good time as well, because it is time for us to go qualifying, and who exactly is going to put it on pole here? A cloudy day today at the Sonoma Raceway, not too far away from San Francisco, towards the northern edge of California. Whilst I've not had the chance to visit this place myself, ladies and gentlemen, what you can see on your pictures is that there is some grass there. Sonoma normally associated with being quite a dusty circuit, depending on the time of year, particularly in the summer, where the grass does normally come barren. But here today, it's definitely not barren. We do have some grass out there, and we're very much keen to see who exactly is going to be out there when it comes to the strongest laps. Well, qualifying starts to tick away, and it does look as though, at least at the moment, a few drivers just waiting to go out, as Pancakes decides he's going to be the first one to make his way out there, and Biker Pilot will follow suit. So, how important will qualifying be today, I hear you ask? It's an interesting question, because this is one of those circuits whereby overtaking is possible, normally in slower disciplines of cars. So what you will see is, if you tune into your live racing at Sonoma on an annual basis, you'll find that this circuit is synonymous with the Toyota Gazoo Racing North America GR86 Cup. And this is one of those circuits that absolutely delivers with its 2 sprint races, but those cars only do have the best part of 230 brake horsepower. They're much slower by comparison, but also they're less aerodynamic and thinner cars. Therefore, they can go side to side around most of the circuit. Conversely, once you start to up the power, once you go to GT3 or LMP2, as you see here, these machines being the final step before you do get to GTPs or LMP1 cars, as they were previously known before the GTP class became the new mainstay prototype class of international racing. Well, you suddenly have a lot of air on the car, and with all these sweeping bends, that means you do have the element of dirty air and understeer creeping in. So it does also mean that overtaking around here becomes a lot more challenging. But setting up the car around the circuit also becomes a bit of a challenge, because given the variety of sweeping bends, you would theoretically think you need to run as much downforce as possible, and you really need to focus on corner speed versus straight line speed. But we do have a couple of short straights around here, where an extra mile an hour or two could be invaluable. But do you shave off some rear wing to be able to achieve that, or do you focus on your corner speed so that way you carry as much speed to the next corner? And that's the thing that drivers are going to have to gamble on. So I suspect most teams will go for a high downforce setup, even Nick Squared, who do have this uncanny talent to get more out of the car by taking the wing off of it. We have seen it round after round, whereby they qualify very well with a car that's got less rear wing on it, and then in the race, whilst they don't have the long-term pace of their rivals who are running more rear wing, the fact they've got the faster car on the straights by default by the best part of 2 to 3 miles an hour means they can't quite be caught in the run to the next braking zone, and that's been their advantage typically. But I suspect even Nick Square today might opt to add some more rear wing on the car to make sure they can maximise the corners. So the short answer to the question of how important is qualifying going to be, very likely quite important around here. Overtaking will be possible, but it is normally going to come where the car in the front is going to make a small error of some description. That'll open up an opportunity, unless you do have the best part of a 3 to 4 attempts a lap pace advantage, and you'll need it at a clinical point, because corners such as turn number 5, which we do see Nicolator making his way downhill through and in towards turn number 6, not only an overtaking opportunity. Turn number 7 as well, which he comes to now as he runs a bit wide into it. It's also one of those corners where you need to lunge up the inside, but the problem is that inside line is much slower compared to the outside line, so you've got to be prepared for the fact if you're going to go for a move, you need to be brave, but you're also going to lose a lot of time and force your rival to lose time as well, particularly if you're in a long pack of cars. But meanwhile, we need to give a warm welcome to our number 39 driver of Lamp, the privateer, who makes his debut for this season today. A previous member of the Just Two Idiots Championship Series community, of course, but very happy to see Lamp make his way out onto the circuit into the LMP2 machine. Indeed, raising the stakes for this car compared to previous seasons, and wish him all the best luck in his debut in the penultimate round of the championship. But as our first time start to make the way on board, well, I can tell you one thing, Pancakes there setting a 26.106. Well, that is the best part of 7.5 cents quicker than Biker Pilot, but we're waiting for the big names to deliver some big times. Well, DC puts himself up there a further second at 1 minute 25.065. 1.5. Very impressive lap. And, well, could the Long Life Motorsport driver today really be pushing the envelope here? He has had those moments of brilliance with regards to individual laps. We've not quite seen him start on the front row so far this season. He's come close. He started on the second row at least once, if my memory serves me correctly, but he's not been a front row starter as of yet. As Jen, the second of the night racing cars, heading around at the moment, and, well, after a first flying lap, goes 7th, but I think that was more of a warm-up lap rather than a flyer or even a banker. But speaking of on-board laps, we're going to see Epmy Dust make his way in towards the hairpin very shortly. And as he does so, coming all the way on around, well, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump on board with Epmy Dust for a flying lap here of the Sonoma Raceway Sportscar Alternate Circuit. Then across that timeline and in towards turn number 1. Flat out as he heads up the hill. Lets the car roll out deep and now get it nice and tight to the final part of the corner and onto the brakes as you brake uphill into turn 2. Unsighted, feed the throttle in, feel the throttle, and now down in towards turn number 3. Onto the brakes once again, trailing on through, and now in towards turn number 4. A dab of the brake to get the weight pitched onto the nose, and now down in towards turn number 5. Hold on the brakes at 100 meters from corner apex down to first gear, and then patience, build the throttle up and make his way through turn number 6. Going all the way through the sweeping right-hander, keep it nice and tight, bring the car to the right-hand side, and now into the downhill, braking down to turn number 7, dropping it all the way down to second gear, keep it nice and close to the apex, and now full throttle on here, let the car roll out, unlock the steering wheel, onto the drag strip, and pull it over to the left to get towards turn 8, and now in towards turn number 9 and 10. Onto the brakes as close as possible to the outside wall, all the way down to first gear, lets the car intentionally roll deep. That's the runoff area we were talking about earlier. And now coming out of the corner and onwards towards the SS sequence he goes. And now here it's going to be full flat out commitment all the way through right into left as he then brings it back into another right-hander here, holding that speed in 4th gear before going up into 5th. Now much more open bend here as he comes all the way through turn 15 in towards 16. Chucks the car in, you've got to have a perfect line here, otherwise you'll go to the grass, but Epmy Dust gets it absolutely spot on. And onto the brakes now, braking 170 meters from corner apex in towards the turn 17 hairpin, down to first gear, comes out the corner there, has to fight with oversteer and a little bit of understeer in quick succession, and then towards the kink of 18 and towards that line. What Epmy Dust is going to do here will be fine. It's going to be a 124.9 and it puts him in at 5th place. A great lap. I think there's a bit more pace out there for Epmy Dust. And the very colourful livery machine, and indeed, much like that livery is a work of art, that lap was a work of art as well. I don't think Picasso could have done any better. And Epmy Dust now really splitting the top 10 in half. He's a whole second off of DC's fastest time at the moment. But remember, we are still waiting for laps from Cat Daddy and Knotavin. They have both yet to go out there. So I suspect, given the fact that we do have 20 minutes and with all these qualifying laps in an out lap, if you were to do them all together, you are looking at no more than what would be approximately, if my mental mathematics is correct, you'd be looking at about 11.5 minutes to get everything done. Well, understandably, they're waiting until everyone else has laid the rubber down for them. They want everyone else to do the hard work, and in the end, they'll borrow other people's homework and be able to go for the best possible lap. But Simply Steve takes the pole time at 23.306, and DC right now on camera tries to go a bit faster as Jen launches up to second place. Now, that is on her 3rd flying lap, and Jen carries on here. And there are always multiple qualifying strategies we have seen this season. I'm not expecting any rain in qualifying, so there's no rush to get these laps done per se. But what we do normally see is that drivers will either put a full fuel tank in for the out lap plus the 6 flying laps, and perhaps come into the bits to change the tyres midway through. Alternatively, they'll put enough fuel in for the out lap plus 2 flying laps, then they'll come into the pits and go back out and rinse and repeat. Now, and of course, that second out lap they do counts as one of their flying laps. Unfortunately, iRacing does not discriminate between a additional out lap plus also what is a flying lap out there. It's all part of the rules and regulations that you'll see in official series as well. And that's why drivers really do have to either commit to all 6 laps in one go, perhaps with the pit stop in order to change the tyres out, where they naturally do lose a pair of laps because they have to come in at the end of one lap and go back out and have a quote-unquote out lap on that second lap. But understandably, by going with the flow, you build up a bit of mental rhythm, and that's a key part around here. If you can get into the mindset of what is knowing exactly where your quarters are, if you can find your flow, find your rhythm, find your timings, you can be just as quick around Sonoma as if you've boiled it down to every individual detail and every little speck of grass that you try to use as a brake marker. But Biker Pilot, oh goodness me, that's going a bit wide there coming through turn number 2, and as he rolls to a halt, he's going to tow to the pit lane with that one. Meanwhile, Cat Daddy has left the pit lane. So he's been stirred into action, and right now our number 69 driver here in the Enterprise livery machine, the Plan Race Cars driver there, but the livery dedicated, I do believe, to the USS Enterprise or one of the many ships from Star Trek. Or as he makes his way onwards here, will it be to infinity and beyond, or will it be beyond him today to try and get towards that very front row? Cat Daddy, of course, has had some very impressive qualifying performances, one of the more impressive ones being at Motorsport earlier in the season, but he's always been chopping at the front 2 rows at of the course of the grid over the course of the last few rounds. But Springflower, and well, we do see the Frenchman here making his way down in towards turn number 5. Your number 93 driver in the very appropriate blue and white livery, although no red on the car there. Although I think I do see one sponsor logo of red, so I'm not quite sure if that counts as all 3 colours of the tricolour. But either way, he definitely has 2 of them on the car and making his way on down the hill right now. He's got a little bit of company in front, but that company does step aside, that being the car of none other than, I do believe, what is Biker Pilot, just simply moving aside there. Knowing a faster car coming up on a lap, so therefore does not want to impede whatsoever great awareness from our driver being shown. But Knotavin has left the pit lane. He has also left hibernation, and somebody has disturbed and stirred the bear. And right now, Knotavin seeing if he can go for pole position today. He's not had every pole. He has missed out on pole position a few times this season, but he has been the driver. And when you add all the package together, whether he qualifying and the race and strategy and outright pace, Knotavin has been the one to beat, and that's why he's an 8-time winner this season. And well, he'll be hoping he can make it 9 times today. But this could be the circuit that will be presenting a bit of a different story here. It's all going to come down to how well he qualifies. Simply Steve's pole lap of 23.306 definitely setting a big marker. And well, as Knotavin makes his way around, we jump on board. So making his way through turn 1 in towards turn 2. A lovely flying line there as he comes out of the second corner. Banging with the steering there. In towards turn 3 he goes. Lifts off the throttle there. And now just a small dab of the brakes. Chuck the car down to second gear. Ooh, goodness me. A bit of oversteer there. And that's cold tyres. He's not quite warmed them up enough yet. So this first flying lap is going to be more akin to a banker. And I think the next one's going to be the one to really watch. We stay on board here for this banker lap by Knotavin as he comes over the crest. And down towards turn 7. You can see the commitment there as he comes all the way down the second gear. And then shifts back up to third as he comes out the corner to get less wheel spin on that rear right tyre and attack. We're getting ready to go in towards turn number 9. We do apologise there for the visual glitch. That's on our side, not on yours, ladies and gentlemen. And coming all the way through turn 9 and 10 at the moment. Well, Knotavin here joining the dots together very nicely from first gear. Now back up the gearbox, but again fighting with power oversteer as he heads on through. Those tyres just not gripping up the way he wants them to at the moment. But also he may have a little bit more fuel in the car, and that means the rear is going to slide around. More fuel means more weight in the rear, and therefore it acts like a pendulum as he swings his way for the right hander of turn number 16, and onto the brakes he goes for turn 17. That's right on track limits, and that was very close to the pit entry wall there as he goes very late into the apex there at the hairpin. In fact, practically cutting the curb, and now going in towards 18. What's it going to be for Knotavin for his first fine lap? Is it going to be close to pole? And the answer is going to be... It's a 23.878. Well, that's half a second, almost 6 tenths, in fact, of Simply Steve's pole time. Well, on that basis then, given what happened in the midst of his lap, particularly those little oversteer moments, I suspect this next lap could be very close to pole position, because he did lose the best part of around 2 to 3 tenths as a result of those small moments, plus also the fact with the extra fuel he's got in the car will all add up this time around as he comes on down the hill, and we'll keep an eye on what he's up to as meanwhile Cat Daddy heads towards the line. He's currently 10th fastest here, and well, he's on a personal best. In fact, he's gone purple in the final sector, 23.755. He moves up to third, so we have got a contest on here for the front row, and right now Simply Steve has set a high benchmark. Jen's in the pit lane now, completed all 6 of her flying laps, but right now it does seem as though Cat Daddy and Knotavin have got something to say. Cat Daddy gets it wrong there coming out of turn number 2, and well, he parks the car for a brief moment, but he's going to get it back on the road gradually. He's got plenty of space and time to do it, and Simply Steve leaves the pit lane. So it does seem as though Simply Steve right now is reacting here and says, right, I'm aware of what's going on, as the Speed Square driver makes his way out. His teammate, of course, of Epmy Dust, well, in terms of where he is currently, is 10th place, and he's on his final flying lap, and this is not looking a good lap right now. It does seem as though the Speed Squared squad definitely having a bit of a challenge. In fact, it's Speed Squad, I should say. I'm getting them mixed up with Nick Squared. I do apologise. But indeed, Speed Squared squad sounds absolutely alliterative, no doubt about it. But as he makes his way on out at the moment, Epmy Dust definitely right now it's trying to get to the root of his problems. You could say he's trying to get to the square root of the issues with regards to his lap time, as Knotavin sets the provisional pole time now 2.5 tenths faster than Simply Steve, a 23.035. The Night Racing driver putting the pressure now on the Speed Squad driver of Simply Steve to respond, and can Steve find a way to do so in the number 23? Well, he's on an out lap here, and he's going to have 2 more laps to try and get this done. But of course, Knotavin is onto his third flying lap, and at this point he's going to see how high he can go, how high he can raise the bar, and that's going to be a problem now, as meanwhile Epmy Dust into the pit lane. He has not improved, and well, with that final lap being a dismal one, he won't be going anywhere higher than 10th place, so he's got all the work to do from the 5th row of the grid at best. Although Biker Pilot, Garlic Dog and Yo Mega haven't all completed their qualifying laps, I think Epmy Dust is secure in 10th place now. I don't think there's any change to that, but Simply Steve finding a bit of oversteer there coming out the hairpin, still warming up the tyres. Well, meanwhile Cat Daddy goes on to another flying lap after his trip to the grass on the previous one. And he's currently involved. He is just shy of 2 tenths off of Jen's time for third place. Well, it could be a story again here today, whereby Cat Daddy and Jen end up scrapping for the final spot of the podium, where Simply Steve's able to stay that far ahead in terms of lap time in the race compared to qualifying. I think Simply Steve's going to find himself in a bit of a no man's land in terms of he'll be second, but he won't have the pace to catch up to Knotavin, but he'll have the pace to make sure Jen and Cat Daddy can't get close. But he's going to try and prove otherwise, as Knotavin improves a little bit further, improves by half a tenth to a 22.953. He does find a 22 out there. What is Simply Steve doing right now? Well, the answer to that is he's not going personal best at the moment. If he's going to do so, he's going to have to save it all up for his final lap. He's on his penultimate qualifying lap at the moment, but things are not quite clicking for Simply Steve. And well, as he rolls his way on through turn 9 to 10, goes very deep there as he makes his way into the corner, albeit brings it back together, but I think even that might have been just a little bit too deep under braking on entry. So it's going to be the next one. It'll be all or nothing when he comes to his 6th and final lap, as Knotavin on his 4th lap at the moment. And, well, the first sector and the middle sector, they've not been personal best. He has not improved so far, although his real strength has come in the final sector. He really let the time screens at a light last time around, as Cat Daddy has crossed the line of 23.411. His final sector massively improved, and that has put him 1.5 tenths ahead of Jen, almost 2 tenths quicker, and he's closing the gap to Simply Steve. So could we have a fight here for the second place spot on the grid? Steve does not improve. He has one more chance of this, and he heads up the rise. We look down over the front of the Speed Squad car. He's making his way out of turn number 2 and up towards 3 he goes. And as he does so here right now, can he join it all together? Well, lovely flying lines there. And this camera angle really gives you an appreciation of how tight the lines are through some of these corners. As he comes down through turn number 5, just rolls a little bit deep. You can see the car twitching as he tried to turn it in, and the bumps in the road not helping as he comes through 6, very tight to the right side, in towards 7 and onto the brakes. Now, again, he can't quite get close to that inside line initially. He wants to let it roll deep, but fighting over the position of the car, runs a little bit wide, and, well, he's within track limits just about, but Simply Steve right now, he does not look comfortable out there as he brakes just where the start of the billboards are, runs very deep into the corner, and, well, the car twitching away from him. That is not a happy line for the hairpin, and for Simply Steve at that point, well, he's going to build up some speed, but I think that might be it. He did improve in the middle sector, however, his start to the final sector has not been impressive, and the problem is now that Simply Steve is going to be battling uphill as he makes his way towards the end of the SS sequence. That run deep into the hairpin really cost him some time, and now getting ready to go into the braking zone here. He's going to make his way into the pit lane. It will be no improvement for Simply Steve. We thought not after his mistake at turn 9. Brushes the wall slightly on entry. That's frustration building, and Cat Daddy comes across the line, does not improve, so it's all or nothing now on his final lap. He did improve in the first sector last time out. Meanwhile, Knotavin, well, he's currently on his penultimate lap. Can he go even faster here? Can he put salt in the wound for everyone else behind? Well, does he need to? And the answer is no, he does not. I think he feels he's confident that Cat Daddy cannot improve by the best part of what will be almost half a second to get on pole position. So Knotavin comes into pit lane, practices pit entry one more time. It's a bit of a challenge in pit lane. You are on the outside of the final corner hairpin, the final major corner hairpin it is. So you have to take it as a much more elongated or wider circumference corner. But as Cat Daddy heads in towards the turn 9-10 complex, well, this time making his way on through the bumps in the runoff area there, and indeed joins it together, but runs a little bit deep himself perhaps, albeit just about missing the grass there. It's such a narrow line, and that's another thing as well about this circuit. What makes it such a challenging one is the fact there is a racing line, but that line is unflinching in how narrow it is. You're either on the racing line, you're on the perfect line for the lap, or you've missed it, as he absolutely lovely puts together a lovely run there on the curb of 15 in towards 16, and now in towards the hairpin he comes, and Cat Daddy at this point, final corner, well, his opening sector's been a slight improvement, middle sector's been matching his previous best, but what has he done here to wrap up the lap? Can he get second over Simply Steve? And the answer is going to be as he heads towards the timing line. It's not enough. It's a 23.681. His previous best of 23.41 to nearest 100th. Cat Daddy will start third at best, and that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen. But what a qualifying session here today at the Sonoma Raceway. Knotavin takes pole by almost 4 tenths over Simply Steve. 3.5 tenths is the more accurate approximation. But Simply Steve fully got it done in the early stages, and Knotavin waited until some rubber had been laid down, and he maximised the time and the condition of the circuit to be able to put that time together. As we see some cars parked up in the pit lane there. Cat Daddy missing out on the front row by only a tenth, but was able to clear Jen for third place by almost 2 tenths, and there was a further 3.5 tenths back to DC, who we started in 5th place, with Springfound making his way onto the third row of the grid, albeit 1.3 seconds off a pole and practically what was 4 tenths off of DC. But then we do have a very close run between Springflower, Pancakes, Lamp, Nicolator and Etme Dust, with all 5 of those drives to the back end of the top 10 being joined together by only 3.6 tenths. This is one of the closest backs we've seen in qualifying. And then Biker Pilot, Garlic Dog, and Yomega, as you see them all parked up here with 1.5 minutes to go. But they won't be going back out. They're just relaxing the pit lane at the moment and soaking up the rays there and analysing the data. Well, they've had a bit more of a dispersed qualifying session, but our 13 drivers have made the way today. Well, if qualifying's anything to go by based on our previous rounds, well, don't count it as that's how the race is going to finish. As we've seen sometimes some drivers really struggle in qualifying and then suddenly put everything together in the race, and vice versa. Some drivers absolutely won that pace merchants, but suddenly over the course of distance, the consistency just starts to let go a little bit. But indeed, Yomega right now starting from the very back as we look on board inside the car. And well, the 3.8 Racing driver known has a bit of work to do today. And the 3.8 Racing having a bit of a challenging day with Biker Pilot in 11th place. But then again, we know that they are a team that whilst they may not be the quickest out there, they are a team that definitely love to show that consistency and staying in it to win it can be just as valuable. And who can blame them when they do put together some absolutely brilliant runs, and they've had some solid top 10 performances over the course of the season. But looking back to the exterior pictures there, and indeed Garlic Dog parked up right now, looking to his car there, as you can see all three cars in the picture. Well, we're not too far away from going to our final warm-up session, ladies and gentlemen. It'll be a 5-minute breather, a bit of respite, but our drivers do take on Sonoma Raceway in anger for 60 minutes of racing action in the Steve's Super Sonoma Special for round number 9 of the LMP2 season of the J2ICS Championship Series. This, of course, being season 12, and you're catching up with all the racing action from the round today. That's it all cooling down, and qualifying is complete. Well, let's head into the warm-up, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as our drivers do make the way into the 5-minute warm-up session, this is a final opportunity, of course, for our drivers to take a bit of a comfort break if they need one. Also, perhaps do some last-minute tweaks to the setup of the car. And most importantly, start to think about strategy. So, if we go based on qualifying, Night Racing, they could be looking at getting a huge score on the board today. Jen may have qualified 4th. She'll be targeting to finish on the podium and try to make it a double podium alongside Knotavin, who may be on course for his 9th win of the season. Now, do keep in mind the fact that we have yet to see a double podium for Night Racing. They have come very close to it on several occasions this season, but we have yet to have Jen take a podium. Could this be the day where Jen finally breaks her bad luck duck and instead makes her way all the way onto that podium, or will she be held at bay by the likes of Simply Steve, who taking that 2nd place on the podium just ahead of Cat Daddy in terms of the qualifying at least, and last time out made his way at 3rd place on the podium ahead of Jen and Cat Daddy through his pace over the race distance. Well, that's going to be his target for the speed squad, but as he comes down through turn 9 in towards number 10, number 23 driver right now has got to be thinking one thing and one thing only. This could be Sebring over again, albeit he starts 2nd today, so there's even more points on the line. He has taken a 2nd place this season. He's taken 3 2nd place in rounds 2, 3, and also 7. So therefore, he's no stranger to being on that front row of the grid when it goes from race start to race end. But he's still got to get the job done here, and consistency will be the key factor. But we can expect plenty of battling on the opening couple of laps, and those laps really will dictate the running order of the field for the rest of the opening stint. And it's going to come down to fuel saving, tyre management, and outright strategy. That's our thought process. But as we do look to Pancake, and will make his way down for the SimCity Racing team. And well, he definitely enjoyed himself last time out at Sebring, enjoying that brilliant battle towards the back end of the top 10. And he's definitely enjoyed himself in qualifying, right in the midst of the madness from 6th through to 10th. But can he make some sense of it all? He would love to take a 6th place finish, and if anybody was to retire in front of him, it would then be promoted all the way through to what would be a 5th place finish. A top 5 there. They don't come too often, but when they do, the points are very valuable. We also got to see our debutant of Lamp squeezing his way right into the midst of that 6th through to 10th battle. So keep your eyes out for the number 39 driver in the very colourful livery machine. Indeed, that's what makes this exciting. Whilst we may not have the quantity of drivers that you would see in other series who are hosted on the North American continent, indeed around the globe, you don't need quantity to have quality racing, and that's what we've seen. Whereby sometimes we've had grids of only 10 cars, but to be fair, with strategy and also these drivers know each other very well. They've raced each other several seasons, therefore they're all able to keep each other on their toes, and you never quite know what's going to come. Speaking of which, what are Nick Square going to do today with Nicolaus's machine? Are they going to give in to the higher downforce setup that seems to be key here, or are they still going to go for the high speed setup? It's just giving them the edge in the races compared to the qualifying sessions. And that's been one of the things that Nicolator, who's been an unsung hero for, he does have this ability to get a lot out of a car that's not optimally set up for a one lap at a given circuit. Well, that's suboptimal there, running wide at turn number 5 and going sideways, but better to get the mistakes out the way now rather than make them in the race, as they say. But he normally does get a lot more out of the car than most can, as DC there taking evasive action. The Long Life Motorsport driver here, 9 precious points on the line, particularly for the team's aspirations in the team's championship in the hunt for the third place spot, which is getting tighter and tighter with points and rounds running out. Remember, every point in the team's championship is valuable. There are no drop scores there, so you really do need to be on your best behaviour and get your best scores over all 10 rounds, whereas in the Drivers' Championship, it's the best 8 rounds that count. And that does include Crown Jewel rounds. They are not given a special exemption, or the idea is that we drop a Crown Jewel round out of the 2, and then we drop one of the 8 Grand Prix rounds, so I understand the rules. It is your 8 best scores go forward. The Crown Jewel rounds, of course, give you an opportunity to get an even bigger score, because we do offer practically not double the points, 1.5 times the points. I still have mathematics correct there. But indeed, if you have a difficult Crown Jewel round, well, it is a huge loss potentially for yourself because of the difference in points available. But a Springflower makes his way on through. And well, the Frenchman last time out at Sebring definitely demonstrating the fact that he's not quite the strongest qualifying driver, but he's definitely a fast race driver. Well, his hope's going to be here that he can be even faster today. But again, he finds himself enraptured in that very tight run for 6th through to 10th. And well, that's where we think all the heat of the fighting is going to be in the opening stage of the race, as well as that battle for third place between Jen and Cat Daddy. But there's Jen, and meanwhile, Cat Daddy, oh, that's not the way you want the car to be, as it's all in pieces there coming out to turn number 4. But he makes his way to the barrier, gets that out of the way nice and soon. Get it out your system, as they say. And, well, of course, you don't want to make those mistakes when we go racing. But the sun has gone away for a little bit. And with the sun doing a bit of a disappearing act, well, that could lead to a bit of intrigue because, understandably, well, it means the circuit will cool down. As we do show you the weather on the right-hand side of your screen. And we do have an ambient of 66 degrees Fahrenheit and a track temperature of 76 degrees Fahrenheit. That track temperature may stay relatively stable now. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the warm-up session is complete. It's time to make our way to the grid for what is our one and only 60-minute race, our Grand Prix race, because it is time for us to get Steve's Supernova Special underway for round number 9 of the LMP2 edition of Season 12 of the Just 2 Idiots Championship Series, brought to you on iRacing. And so as our drivers make the way onto the grid, this is how they'll line up for our one and only race today. Knotavin takes pole position for night racing, the Canadian driver ahead of Simply Steve by 3.5 tenths. The Speed Squad driver already got it done early in qualifying, but in the end, Knotavin finding the magical cure. And with it, of course, remember, all Knotavin needs to do today is secure some points, and he will be your champion-elect going into our season finale. So, with a battle more for second place, perhaps in the championship, Simply Steve right now knowing he could pick up a big haul of points, but Cat Daddy for playing racing cars, well, he's definitely going to try and race his way forward. The number 69 driver ahead of Night Racing's Jen, who in the end was the best part of almost 2 tenths behind. Then we do have Long Life Motorsports DC starting 5th ahead of Springflower, the gap between the two of them being 3 tenths, and then Springflower heading up a very tight run all the way to 10th place that consists of himself, Pancakes in 7th for SimCity Racing, Lamp on his debut in 8th there, the privateer, as the formation lap gets underway, and Nicolator in 9th there for Nick Squared ahead of Speed Squad's Etme Dust, with the Norwegian driver having his worst qualifying performance in recent history, only achieving 10th place, beginning our tightage. You can understand right now that he's going to be feeling confident he can make up those places quite quickly. Starting in 11th to make up our final full row of the grid is Biker Pilot for 3.8 Racing ahead of playing race cars Garlic Dog, and then we do see starting last but not least in 13th place is 3.8 Racing's Yo Mega, 13th in the 101 car, but can he give us a one-on-one on how to turn a poor qualifying performance into a strong race? All that and more we're going to find out, ladies and gentlemen. Our drivers do carry on around the formation lap at the moment, but remember, they're going to be tiptoeing around compared to the speeds they will be doing when they do go green flag racing. Now you can see the lakes at the bottom of your screen, which does articulate the fact that in the spring and also the winter, the Sonoma Raceway really is a bit of a nature reserve, but in the summer, given the heats that are seen in California, suddenly it turns into what looks like a bit of a dust bowl. Indeed, you could confuse it to a brief degree with Willow Springs, which is right in the midst of a desert, and I can tell you that, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't visited it in the summer, and, well, I don't want to ever visit it when the temperature outside was the best part of, well, if I remember in centigrade, it was 53 degrees centigrade at 9 o'clock in the morning, and, well, as a British tourist out there, everyone's asking me the question, why on earth are you walking around around and enjoying yourself that early in the morning when it's so hot. And I think the Fahrenheit there was pushing the best part of 120 plus. But still, you've got to be there to believe it, as right now drivers make the way on around. But enough of my tourism. Indeed, right now, this is definitely going to be a tour to explore as our drivers head on around. And Sonoma circuits that definitely is uncompromising for those who underestimate it. But as Sebring Steve and Knotavin lead the field up behind the pace car, we do look on board from Lamp's perspective. And more the priority in the very lovely liveried Motul machine. But right now, starting on that fourth row of the grid and trying to get a bit more tyre temperature into the car, plus a little bit of brake temperature. Although tyre temperature is really going to be the most important part here for the opening sequence of bends, where you need all the grip you can. And you can see here the field right now very tight as they roll the way through. Not much space to be able to warm those tyres. Our drivers will always find some in the double file formation. Indeed, they're not allowed to go single file and then re-emerge into double file. They have to hold the double file all the way through as per the rules. But we're not too far away now from getting towards the very end of the formation lap. At the very back, we Omega, meanwhile, knowing there's a lot of ground to be made. But the 3.8 racing driver has one advantage starting from the back of the field. And this is not to be sarcastic. He has full visibility of everything in front of him and he has no pressure from behind. One of the things, of course, is when you're in the midst of the field, particularly if you're starting, say, 6th for Springflower, is the fact that you have cars around you, in front of you, and behind you, and therefore it means you've really got to be aware of what's going on. Whereas if you're towards the back, there's less pressure, there's less cars, and therefore you can actually make some big gains should somebody get it wrong in front very quickly, because you can see everything that others cannot. But as we get ready to see how they all get on, well, the pace car gets ready to pull away into the pit lane, and Knotavin gets himself set to take us away, because it's almost time, ladies and gentlemen, for round number 9 of the championship, and in our LMP2s, it's almost time for us to get Steve's Super Sonoma Special underway at the helm of Knotavin for night racing. And as he builds up the speed, it's lights out, away we go for round number 9 as Knotavin leads the field to the timing line. A great start there, keeping the field on their toes. They make the way up the hill, but he roars his way up into the opening braking zone, where we can see Cat Daddy and Simply Steve side by side, and Cat Daddy immediately going around the outside there. It's a lovely move from Cat Daddy, and catching Simply Steve napping by comparison, and Jen meanwhile under pressure on DC. DC's going to go round the outside. It's a quick move there from DC, but a calculated one, and in the end, DC up in a full blaze. He just twitches a little bit. Jen looks up the inside, squeezes in. DC gives the space there. That's daring from Jen. Normally drivers would not go for it, but Jen says, right, all or nothing. And as they come over the rise in towards turn number 7, DC back with the inside. He's still going to fight. This will be too wide all the way towards the end of the first half of the lap. And DC seems to be there, but on the drag strip they'll go. They touch once, they touch twice. And in the end, DC backs off, and Jen's able to carry on. And here comes Springflower now, looking up the inside of the Frenchman, says, right, it's my turn. Dives on the inside into the hairpin. Will he be able to get it done? No, he won't, as DC just understeers a little bit wide. A small twitch. The car wobbles away, and DC almost ends up off the road. He gets it back together. He drops down to 9th place, and what a plucky start. And it's all gone wrong for the Bong Life Motorsport driver, who's struggling with the car at the moment. And it's going to be Biker Pilot going up the inside of him into the sweepers. They're on the outside. They touch. Biker Pilot goes sideways there. And as he comes to the skate road, he comes to halt. But well done to him being able to get that car stopped in the nick of time. As meanwhile, Omega, Garlic Dog and Pancakes, they'll fighting each other. And that's going to be Omega clearing Garlic Dog. And Pancakes side by side with him there. But can Pancakes get up the inside for Sim City Racing? Yes, he will. He goes all in the brakes. He's going to get that done as Garlic Dog backs off. But what a collection of battles to start this race off. And right now, Yo Mega having not the best run out of the final corner. So he goes on to lap number 2. We could see Pancakes looking for a move here. But in the end, he's going to settle behind his Pancakes. He can't make a way in. So after one lap, well, I was about to give you a rundown of the order. But Jen's lost out Springflower. Mistake at turn number 2. Jen's gone wide. And Springflower now moves up into 4th place. You could not make this up. It's absolute pandemonium. Albeit, hold up a second. There's DC, and Garlic Dog's found his way past. So DC's having even more woe. After a very exciting start. Oh, that's Pancakes! Pancakes is into the barriers, losing out on turn number 4, and the whole rear of the car comes loose, and suddenly all pieces are over the road, or at least onto the grass. And Pancakes are going to be turned to the pit lane with that one. That car is not making its way under its own steam back to the pits. That's going to need a crane and a tractor. But meanwhile, as Etme Dust and Jen look to do battle, well, Jen losing out to what was your leaders early on, down to 5th. Etme Dust there already up into 6th from 10th place. And that's what we said, the Speed Squad driver, you can never underestimate how well he qualifies, because in the race he always finds a way to go forward. I think he's one of those drivers who gets quicker as the race day goes on. I think he does put in the practice beforehand, but practice when you're by yourself out on the circuit isn't quite the same as when you can look at other drivers, see what they're doing, and you suddenly just naturally start to learn what everyone else is doing to be a bit quicker than you, and you learn it so quickly. and that's with Empty Dust right now. I think he finds pace as the day goes around, and indeed, as Jen and Spring Flower act as two very good tour guides for him, well, therefore he might be able to pick up even more pace to go battling with them, as DC around the outside of Garlic Dog then to the hairpin. Garlic Dog holding the inside line, whilst he did lift off to give up the plays. Well, the problem is when you go around the outside, you're turning for a much wider corner, you've got more distance to cover, and that's why DC in the end had to take the whole corner in order to get the job done. What the start to this race it's been. Onto that 3 they go, and Knotavin right now leads, but only by 6 tenths over Cat Daddy. And right now you can see the playing race cars driver here. He is not letting the leader go. Simply Steve in third there, 8 tenths behind. Then you've got Springfly in fourth ahead of Empty Dust and Jen. And Empty Dust has just found his way past Jen. I believe Jen's had another off track. Turn number 2 or turn number 4. We'll get a replay of that shortly. And then we do have a Lamp currently at 7 tenths behind in 7th. Started 8th, up 1 place, ahead of Nicolator. And then Yomega is in 9th, just ahead of DC, who after that brilliant start, it all went wrong with a couple of twitches of the car when he was battling side by side with Jen. And Jen really forced the move back on him, but fairly to be fair with you, ladies and gentlemen, in the fact they're coming in towards turn number 5. Jen decided she was not going to let DC go, and DC gave the space as was warranted. And then that brilliant battle that saw them touch coming down through turn number 7, and now DC all the way down, although the touch itself not triggering his fall down the order, but it definitely lost him some momentum, and then suddenly everybody else was able to pile on the pressure. But now Yomega feeling the pressure of his own here as they roar their way through the SS sequence. We look on board from the 3.8 racing car looking backwards, and as it comes in towards turn number 16, you can see there the fact that DC, even in the dirty air, he's not afraid to go all in terms of speed. Looks up the inside, and Yomega chops off the nose there. DC thinking about it, locks up the brakes, and well, I think DC was trying to simply use the momentum and some late braking on the inside to scare Yomega into going wide, but Yomega called his bluff. And well, the thing is, in that situation, if they had made contact, it would have been DC, I suspect, being given a warning from the stewards in the fact he would have lunged to move on the inside just as they're about to turn into the apex, and Yomega would have been within his right to turn in because he's got to make the corner at some point. But meanwhile, looking back to Springflat, Empty Dust and Jen, we can see the top 3 have already absconded. They are almost 4 seconds clear at the moment, and Springflower leading the rest of the field, albeit Empty Dust there close behind. I think Springflower right now just focusing on delivering his racing lines as cleanly and as coolly as possible, as Jen, Lamp and Nicolator all on the back of this group. And it really is now a 5-way fight for 4th place here, and should anybody up front make a mistake, they will be absorbed into this battle, and suddenly we could have a 6-way fight for the final spot on the podium. Never say never, of course. It can happen, ladies and gentlemen. It's happened so far this season. Knotavin, your race leader, 1.5 seconds clear ahead of Cat Daddy. Cat Daddy being gradually dropped here as they make the way onto the final stretches of this lap. Yomega and DC, they're still fighting side by side coming out of turn number 10. And well, Yomega gets back ahead there coming into the sweeping S's. And so DC, he's got the pace, but the problem is he can't beat Yomega. The 3.8 racing driver really putting on a stoic defense here. And this is only the opening 5 minutes of the race, let alone the rest of it. I think we're going to have plenty of action before this is all said and done. Meanwhile, Nicolator and Lamp have swapped places. There's been a bit of story there. We'll get you a replay of that when we can, ladies and gentlemen. But I believe Lamp's had an error of some description, although that's happened off camera. But Yomega right now, head of DC, at least going on to lap number 5, but DC wants another chance of this, and as they make the way up the hill, well, let's see if he can find it this time. But at the moment, at least, doesn't seem as though he will be able to as they roar the way up the hill. Although that's going to be a slight run wide there of Yomega, but gets it together. DC a bit of power oversteer there, clipping the apex curve a bit too high. Both drivers here not quite perfect, but at the same time not making too many mistakes. Bit too much curve from both drivers, and too much speed as well from DC there. They both run wide, and now it's going to be Yomega going even wider there at turn number 5. And DC finally gets the place. He had to pressure Yomega into a mistake, almost pressured himself into a mistake. In fact, he did make a slight error, but nowhere near as big. And Yomega loses 9th place there to DC, but DC having to do it the hard way. He's not having an easy day at all under the Sonoma sun. But as we come back to Springflower, you can see the change. In fact, Springflower, Empty Dust and Jen, as they were, Nicolator has found his way ahead of Lamp. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a trip back in time and take a look at some of the big moments from the start of the race, including the very race start. So this is how it all began as we went green flag racing, and in particular the focus we did see then the timing get going. DC with what was a little bit of slow start, so Jen just running away as Cat Daddy meanwhile on the inside of Simply Steve up through 1, and in the end Simply Steve just a little bit wide, could not get back to the inside. Then cold brakes and cold tyres did not want to risk it. So then we did see this for DC. Jen came off the corner and DC looked from outside to inside. A very good attempt here from DC, and he got it done. Jen in the end had no response, but but the problem was that a little bit of a twitch there on cold tyres coming out of turn 4 gave Jen the confidence to look up the inside, and DC was made to go that little bit wider there coming through turn number 5. He had to respect the fact the night racing car was there, and then in towards turn number 7. Well, this is where it got so close between them, coming over the rise, too wide all the way down, and in the end they briefly touch just about now as DC understeers a little bit. Jen holds on, but DC with that contact saw Springflower then suddenly find his way up the inside. So Springflower at that point went for the move in towards the hairpin, and DC on the deep line, and with also the dirtier line on the outside of the entry into turn number 9, the car twitched away from him, and he lost all those times and places in just a single stroke. And very unfortunate for DC there, when he made that brilliant move, it all went a bit wrong. But we did have this go wrong for Biker Pilot on the opening lap, and this was your 3.8 Racing driver battling side by side with DC, and a bit of a rub between the two by the looks of things, although don't quote us on that. The stewards will have more camera angles than we do if it gets reported, and unfortunately for the S's they're going sideways but getting the car back onto the road. Then on lap number 2 we did have this happen to Jen. It all went a bit wrong through the opening couple of corners. At the time she was running in, we do believe, what was at full place, and in the end it went a little bit wide there, and suddenly it was Springflower just simply cutting up the inside and getting that move done to take the place. And then we did have this huge moment as well for DC. And just behind, so after difficulties of lap number 1, lap number 2 said it's going to be even worse for you as he made his way up in towards the right-hander of turn 2, took way too much speed in the corner, had to lift off the brakes and just gradually roll the car, but he lost out places there to several drivers, including none other than Pancakes and Garlic Dog and Yomega, so all the way down to 11th place at that point. But then we had this huge moment for Pancakes only months later, and this was Pancakes heading up the hill in towards turn number 4. Did he take too much apex curb? He did. The car bounced and lost the rear of the car, and in the end he was a passenger in the car on the exit and straight to the barrier, and the car all in pieces, and hopefully all's okay with the driver. And then we did have this on lap number 3 for Jem. And well, this was Jem battling with Springflower at the time, coming out to 2 in towards 3 and 4 as they made the way up the hill with Etmidust there looking for a move, and Jen just ran a little bit wide, and Etmidust looked up the inside there into turn at number 5, making that place count. So a bit of a tactical call there from Etmidust to sneak his way on the inside. Then we did have what was this for Nicolator, as Nicolator was chasing a Lamp coming through the S's, and it was into the hairpin that Nicolator went all on the inside. Lamp not really fighting this. Oh, goodness me, and Lamp brushing the pit wall there by the looks of things. Well, I'm amazed that car's still going after that contact. If that was firm contact, that front, what would be front left suspension or the front left bodywork will definitely be crowding around the front left tyre. He's going to need to be careful of that, because I suspect that damage may hold the car back to a degree. But those are the big moments, ladies and gentlemen, from the opening 6 minutes or so of the race. And with that, it's back to your live racing we go. As we do come back, there's still plenty of time left in this one, and we've only cleared 10 minutes, and we've got even more excitement to come. Now, looking at Cat Daddy, he has been caught up to by Simply Steve, as Knotavin has left him behind. And we should also give a quick shout out to Arturo Mayorga, the brilliant software designer who designed the software that enables us to bring you replays of racing action within an iRacing replay file. That replay file being provided by the J2ICS Championship Series administration. A huge thank you to them. And well, with the software from Arturo Mayorga, we're able to bring this as close as possible to a raw live viewing experience for you guys and girls. But as we do see Cat Daddy and Simply Steve together there, well, 8 seconds is the gap between them and Etmidust, so therefore they're looking relatively safe at the moment in terms of this being turned into a menage a trois, as there we do see Etmidust bringing himself as part of a trio of Springflower and Jen as well into the fray, and Nicolator meanwhile, well, his pace is oscillating a little bit. I don't think he's quite got the pace to stay with the Battle for Fourth at the moment, but he's within arm's reach of it should it start to get a little bit more intense. So it's a good place to be. But does Nicolator now start to turn towards strategy here and think, right, how can I potentially undercut them or overcut, either way, but most importantly, find a way to leap them with regards to the fuel I take in the pit. And well, that's got to be the theme here, but what he'll need to predicate that on is the idea they're all going to fight each other, which isn't always guaranteed, because remember, all these drivers will be thinking about strategy as well. You could understand if Jem right now at the back of the trio is probably thinking, well, do I want to get this done on the road, or do I do it through fuel saving? So there's always that balancing act that every driver has to think about throughout the race distance, is whether to attack on the road or to attack in the pit lane. Of course, if it's not successful in the pit lane, you've lost a lot of effective time, but when it is successful, it feels very rewarding when you don't have to do the hard work. But as we see Jen looking up the inside of Springflower in towards turn 9 and 10, well, Springflower going a little bit deep there, but on the outside line, given the fact now we do have tyre temperature and the track has rubbered up a little bit more, therefore there's more grip available compared to how that line was when we did see DC try it on the open lap, where cold tyres, cold brakes, and also less rubber being laid down, and it did mean, unfortunately, there wasn't enough grip for him, but Springflower able to get away with that now as he come on through the assist sequence. Now, we have been informed that with regards to if a driver should run out wide there at turns 9 and 10, the rules of engagement between two drivers is the driver who runs out wide and is on the outside will have to give way to a driver who's on the inside. So therefore, if we do see a two-wide battle and the driver does run very deep there, they do have to give way to a driver on their inside. So that'll be something on the minds of these drivers, that if they can get to the inside going in towards turns 9 and 10, it will give them a little bit of a guaranteed opportunity to force a move going into the SS sequence. Although nothing's ever guaranteed. It's not as though they have to completely lift off and cede the position, but they must be willing to give position to the car on the inside there as part of the quote-unquote rejoin, because they are effectively off track. They do have to rejoin, but we don't consider it an off track for the purposes of stewarding. But meanwhile, right on track right now is Knotavin as he makes his way off of the drag strip, and Cat Daddy there still brings Simply Steve along with him for the ride. But the gap between these two, whilst it is static at 3 to 4 attempts, the gap to Knotavin constantly open up, and Knotavin that last lap was a whole second quicker by comparison. But meanwhile, Jen versus Springflower. Jen's going to try and make the move, getting a bit of run out of 7 in towards 9, and in around the outside before the braking zone, and Springflower letting that one go. So Jen getting a move done at long last, a move she's been building up to, but Springflower, I suspect now, will just simply stay behind. But of course, in these sequences, we get to see, or get the inside knowledge perhaps, or an estimate of how our drivers have set up the cars and how they are feeling in terms of the car setup, whether it's in clear air versus the dirty air of another car. So will we see Springflower fall backwards here? Does he perhaps struggle in dirty air? Whereas meanwhile, Nicolator, well, given that battle between Jen and Springflower, that has brought the Nick Square driver right onto the back of it. He's now only 1.5 seconds behind, but again there, just a little bit of sideways motion coming out the hairpin, a little bit of wheel spin. I think, once again, Nick Squared may have gone for a slightly lower downforce setup on this car. Well, they may have just taken off one click of wing here today, rather than a couple of clicks, because normally seeing the car slide around like that, or alternatively, they've given it a lot more rear ride height compared to the front, although they've got to be careful about the ride heights around here, given the fact that whilst the road surface itself is relatively smooth, it is a bit bumpy at certain spots, it's the fact you've got so many transitions from the road surface to high curbs at the apex, and if you hit one of those curbs with a very low front ride height, well, you're going to be breaking that front suspension very quickly. And of course, you are able to do that in terms of setting a lower front ride height than the rear. The idea being that if the car is pitched forward aerodynamically, then you've got a looser rear end, and it means the car will come around quicker on the corners. But what it also means is you need to start driving the car with the throttle. Now, that sounds a little bit obvious, given the fact that you have two pedals in these cars. You have a throttle pedal and also a brake pedal. But here it out in terms of the fact that when you do have a very loose rear end, the way you calm the rear end down in a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, such as these Dallara P217 LMP2 machines, is essentially you've got to get the throttle on. It pushes the engine down. It pushes the centre mass of the car down into the tarmac, because most of the weight is concentrated towards the rear of the machine. That's what we mean when you say a drive-by throttle in these cars. And well, of course, Porsche, the mark that does cars with rear engine rear-wheel drive, the engine's mounted over the rear axle rather than in front of the rear axle towards the centre in the case of these cars. Porsche ready to embody the spirit of a rear engine rear drive and thereby drive by throttle, but these cars are a close approximation to it. Speaking of approximations right now, Empty Dust will still be thinking they can keep Jen behind for a little bit longer, although Jen has caught up quite quickly in all of this, as Captain and Simply Steve are getting closer. Now, coming back to them, 15 minutes into the race, and the number 69 driver here. Well, of course, the one advantage he does have is the fact that I suspect, whilst he's probably thinking to himself he won't be able to catch Knotavin unless some divine intervention happens, is he can make this race a bit miserable for Simply Steve at this point. Now, he doesn't really need to do anything, as Simply Steve goes very deep there into the hairpin. I think that's by design by Simply Steve. I think he's struggling with the dirty air off of the back of the playing race cars machine. So by doing so, by running deep there, what he's actually done, Simply Steve, is he's lessened the braking forces he's using into turn 9. So he's intentionally turned it into a very V-shaped hairpin rather than a U-shaped one. And by going deep, he gives himself a clearer line. He doesn't put as much pressure on the front brakes nor the front tyres to get the car stopped. And therefore, all he's doing is leaning more into the front left tyre to get it turned through the corner. So there's always a downside to it. He will be increasing his tyre wear slightly, but the upside is he's not, on the whole, overheating the front of the car as much. And that's the problem I think he's experiencing at the moment. The fact that he's been 3 to 4 attempts on average of Cat Daddy's car, great. He's struggling to get any closer because he's got so much dirty air in his way, and therefore all it's doing is heating the front of the car up and he's losing time. But speaking of time, it's time for a pit stop, says Lamp. And as he makes his way in towards the pit lane, well, right now, your number 39 driver Now, much like a lamp, is it a bright idea or not a bright idea, I hear you ask? Well, I think he'll be thinking this is a bright idea. This is one of the earliest pit stops we have seen in a long time, but I think the thought process is here that he's going for an undercut, and by coming in so early, he may also get some repair work done to that front left. I think he picked up quite a bit of damage on that front left, although not enough to bring home a meatball flag necessarily, where the car must go into the pit lane, unless the driver thinks they can keep it out there, but normally it's too risky, as we briefly lose Cat Daddy to the ether, but he does return. But I think Lamp's decided, with the damage that's picked up, because his pace did slightly falter over the last few laps, that by now getting that car repaired, he can get his pit stop done nice and early, have a clear track in front of him. At that point, he can just go charging on and see what he can do there to try and get back into the top 10 and potentially chase down a spot inside the top 5. And well, Lamp has now left the pit lane. There he is in the 39. An 18-second stop. The fast repair does not add any time to the pit stop. Indeed, it's done in parallel with regards to the fuel being put in the car and any tyre changes. And keep in mind, of course, fuel and tyres are done simultaneously in these cars. Although they 17.8-second stop, fuel will have definitely gone in, and at most, I suspect 2 tyres would have been changed. And they would be the outside leaning tyres, because this circuit is a clockwise circuit with more right-handers than left-handers. Typically, it will mean the left-hand side tyres do get changed. But do keep in mind, you've got some very high load left-handers here, and that would be particularly turn 7, which Lamp has just made his way through, and therefore tyre wear on the right can be just as excessive on the left in some expectations. Albeit it is very rare to find a circuit where tyre wear is evenly distributed across both sides horizontally of the car, although you never know, to be fair. And indeed, right now, Cat Daddy and Simply Steve will be keeping an eye on their own tyre wear as well. Coming down, also one of the questions is it the right thing to change the tyres, even if you change a couple? Where there are arguments for and there are arguments against. You never want to change the tyres vertically at the front versus the rear of the car. You don't want to change a pair, because what you do is unbalance the car for the opening couple of laps until you get those tyres warmed up. But suddenly, if you've got very cold front tyres, let's say, compared to rear tyres or vice versa, you can either have a lot of grip on corner entry and zero grip on corner exit, or the other way around, and that normally leads to some spins. That's why you change tyres on one side, because then you do have a balance of grip, whereby at certain corners, you won't be able to carry as much speed as others, depending on the side the tyres change. But can you stay on the same tyres? That's also a fault. But right now, here's a fault for you. Simply Steve taking a quick look up the inside there of Cat Daddy. Cat Daddy did go deep as a result, so Simply Steve getting what he wanted, but a little bit of power oversteer there as he came out to the hairpin. And the Speed Squad driver right now just not quite able to finish the move. What he was doing there was putting the pressure on Cat Daddy not to make it into the hairpin, but to get him to make a mistake and then have the run up in towards turn number 2, which they now clear. But as both tries come on through, well, Simply Steve there bearing his fangs, but unfortunately needs to sharpen his teeth a little bit more as the American driver comes up through turns 3 and 4. And Cat Daddy right now, I can tell you one thing, he's been very impressive all season with the consistency, particularly he's been in these high pressure situations, and it didn't work out at Sebring last time out for Cat Daddy, but here today, if he brings his second place home, this is definitely going to be up there, one of his best performances of the season. And to be fair, Simply Steve as well, we're really pushing on, but you can see the car just rolling a little bit deep there. But he does bring it back to a late apex. That will gain a bit more speed onto the drag strip, but it's not enough of a run here to be able to go on the attack. So instead, just wait once again as they come down towards turns 9 and 10. But noticing that deep line, make sure he gets out of the dirty air zone of the car in front, or gets to the side of it, and it just helps him get the rotation. But leaving them for a brief moment, we see Jen versus Epmy Dust, and Jen coming back here. Epmy Dust started past her earlier on, looking around the outside of turns 9 and 10, but now what's going to be the play here? Is it switchback or outside? It is just cut back into line, but Jen here gets in nice and close as they make their way into the SS sequence, but this is the hardest part. You can see their difference in the line. Jen taking much tighter entry line, trying to offset the dirty air, but we'll have to lift the throttle slightly on corner entry in order to compensate for a tighter entry line, not able to carry as much speed in, and therefore Jen falling back a little bit more, but being that close in 2 attempts coming into the S's. I'll tell you one thing, as a driver at that point, the fact that Jen completely recalculated her lines, she's been practicing a lot, and that is the sign of someone who's a professional at their craft as they make their way onwards towards the next lap. Coming on through right now, Epmy Dust still holding on for a little bit longer. But indeed, this battle really building up between these two. And I suspect right now, Springflat 1 second behind, and it's a further 2 seconds to Nicolator. They're both going to be eyeing this battle right now and thinking to themselves, well, if it's getting this close and they're starting to fight each other, it could be potentially a good time to start thinking about the pit stops. As unfortunately, I'm hearing in my ear, ladies and gentlemen, we have had Lamp have a bit of an incident. He's had to tow to the pit lane. That might be his race. Unfortunately, in arrears, as Pancakes his race after that huge stunt to the back, turn number 4. They've not been able to get the car repaired, unfortunately, and he's out. But meanwhile, how about this out and about? Cat Daddy under pressure from Simply Steve. Steve on the inside, and now Cat Daddy runs wide. He's going to rejoin, but he'll rejoin on a much wider line at turn number 10. Steve will get ahead initially here on the exit of the hairpin. And Cat Daddy has to give up the spot, and in the end he can't fight his way through turns 11 and 12, and Simply Steve does take second place back. Well, a better run coming out to turn number 7, and in the end he was able to get it done by the hairpin, but Cat Daddy's not out this yet, and I suspect right now he'll be thinking to himself, okay, I've lost the place, I've lost the battle, but I haven't lost the war, as they say, as they come down towards the hairpin this time, and you can see that right now, Simply Steve, he's got the move done, but where does he go from here? Can he make a breakaway? Can he finally head off into distance here? He was the second fastest in qualifying, but he wasn't that much clear from Cat Daddy, and that's the problem right now. These two very equal in terms of one-lap pace. Meanwhile, into the pits, we thought a pit stop would be coming for somebody in the battle for fourth place, but not Jen. We thought it might have been Nicolate or Springflower, but Jen comes in, and I think she's decided, right, if I can't beat Empty Dust on the road for now, I'm going to need to try and force his hand in the pit lane. So let me take things into my own hand, and Jen here taking the initiative for Night Racing. Now, is this the right call to be made? Well, given the fact the field has now started to spread quite significantly, I think the answer is yes. Jen's going to have some clear track ahead of her, and Joe Mega comes on through to complete his next lap, and as he does so, the 3.8 Racing Driver having the best part of a 40-second gap to Garlic Dog. Well, Garlic Dog right now have not pitted, but has been involved in a couple of small errors. Well, understandably, the playing a race car's driver here may not be a factor to play in Jen's race, but we will see. He does have Biker Pilot closing up to him quite rapidly, however, and Jen is still being serviced. Car from the Jacks there, so therefore they're going for a tyre change at Night Racing. That'll be 2 tyres being changed, 22-second stop, so a bit of fuel going in the car as well. And Biker Pilot and Garlic Dog do go ahead. Now, how big is the gap there from Jen to Biker Pilot and Garlic Dog? The gap is 5 seconds heading in towards turn number 2 at least. So, Jen's got some clear road ahead, but how quickly she gets these tyres turned on, that's going to be the big factor. And whether she does end up catching up to the battle for 9th and 10th on the road, or is affected the battle for 10th and 11th on strategy. So, we will wait and see. But as Knotavin carries on, well, right now he knows that right now he's in control of this race by 11.5 seconds over Simply Steve, and Cat Daddy a further 1.5 seconds behind. Well, the Playing Race Cars drive has fallen back a little bit, and I think there needs to be a reaction here from Playing Race Cars. They need to think about some strategy, because right now Cat Daddy is running out of cards on the road, and a quick reset to the pit lane may just give him the confidence going into the second stint. But the problem is, if he does pit now, he does make it a much longer second stint, but he'll make it even longer if he goes that deep at turn number 5, because that's an error there that he's not going to be too happy about, and that opens the gap up to Simply Steve to 4 seconds. An easy error to make, but a costly one there for Cat Daddy, and that could be the end of the battle for the long term here, because now with that gap created, unless Simply Steve makes a mistake of his own, or there's something we don't know about in the pit lane, well, suddenly Cat Daddy's made his job even harder. He's doubled the amount of work he's got to do to try and get that gap back down, but we will see what he can do as he carries on. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we get a quick replay of what exactly happened to Lamp only moments ago, and what was a big shunt, unfortunately, and this is what happened to a number 39 driver. And this was coming up the run from turn number 7 in towards 8 and 9. And, well, just went straight on the drag strip. An issue with the car, perhaps, and Lamp just turned to the pit lane. So it's over there just like that. But meanwhile, we did have, of course, this move for Simply Steve and Cat Daddy. And, well, it was a good run out of turn number 7 in towards 8. Steve on the inside. This was for second place. And, well, in the end, you can see Cat Daddy wanted to hang it all the way around the outside. But in the end, ran out of road. And Simply Steve on the inside and got the job done. And then, unfortunately, the woes of Cat Daddy continued, because he did have this error coming down in towards turn number 5. And we're right on board. Let's listen in. And on the brakes there, and I think just missing his braking point by about 10 metres, and you could tell in the end he dropped it at first gear, hoping he could get it stopped. Now to roll off the brakes line, a lockup was going to come otherwise, and then let it go to the grass. And that was woe for Cat Daddy and also for Lamp. And back to your live racing we go, ladies and gentlemen. As we do coming back, well, running board with Cat Daddy at the moment. As we can see here, still out on circuit, not coming into the pit lane as of yet, but off into distance. Simply Steve now 3.6 seconds clear, although Cat Daddy has gained a little bit of time on this previous lap. Looking back to Epmy Dust, and there is Springflower behind, and Springflower right now trying to stay with him. Nicolator 3.2 seconds away from this pairing now, so Nicolator has lost a bit of time over the last couple of laps. However, never say never, number 5 driver could be saving quite a bit of fuel here. That may be the strategy he's going to deploy, as Jen matching the pace of Epmy Dust, Springflower and Nicolator at the moment. Still getting those tyres rubbered in, plus also a heavier car with the fuel put in to go to the end of the race. So Jen needs to go a little bit quicker right now to guarantee some security being able to leap of the group for 4th place. But then again, Epmy Dust and Springflower could be reacting here. They could be starting to try and pump in fast laps, essentially what would be qualifying equivalent laps on race fuel before they make that pit stop. But these fuel tanks, they do normally go within the hour. The best best part of what is at least 30 to 40 minutes. Sometimes we've gone the best part of 45 to 50 minutes before a pit stop, depending on the circuit, as DC decides it's time to come in. So we do have, in simple terms, a very wide pit window in these races, but drivers normally do go for an undercut just before the half-an-hour mark, or we do see most drivers try to go as long as humanly possible. But DC here coming in to make sure that he's covered off of Omega. And will can the Bong Life Motorsport driver have another solid second stint to recover all the ground he lost in the first stint, particularly at the start, and perhaps get into that fight for 5th place? We'll never know until the very end. As Omega right now, the 3.8 racing driver, in a bit of a lonely race. He's 7th on the road, but this is effectively for 9th place he's racing. But still some solid points here for 3.8 team. And unfortunately, with the woe that's hit Biker Pilot early on, well, Biker Pilot right now still chasing after Garlic Dog, so his battle's not over yet. So he might be able to get involved in this one. There could be some more points on the cards. And what I think, if 3.8 Racing can pick up some big points, they'll be going into the season finale with a huge smile on their faces in the fact they've definitely been one of the solid teams out there and hunting the top 5 spot in the team's championship. And even though they're not the fastest drivers out there, I wouldn't want to liken them to, say, the Minardi of this grid, but I can tell you one thing, all the underdogs out there definitely deserve a round of applause, and 3.8 Racing, definitely some true underdogs out there pushing well above their weight. But as Biker Pilot there takes a bit too much curve at turn number 6, a bit of enthusiasm, seeing the suspension come clattering down to earth. Well, number 42 driver will not want to repeat that in a hurry, because that will not make the car feel any better, particularly for the driver. Yes, it may be simulated, yes, he may be on a rig, but if he is on what is a direct drive wheel in particular, hitting those curves, and if he's got the direct drive forces set high enough, he will feel that through the steering wheel. And I can tell you, those wheels are not to be messed with. They can break thumbs and fingers. I've almost broken my own thumb in one once, ladies and gentlemen. It was only a week into owning one, and I forgot to take my thumb out when I spun the car, and well, the wheel snapped around on me, and thankfully I got my thumb out just in the nick of time as I almost broke it. But still, enough about me, more about the drivers out on the circuit, and right now Biker Pilot's still giving chase to Garlic Dog. But we are still waiting for those pit stops to really start to come. We've seen a couple out there, DC of course in, and Jen as well, and they are your 2 highest place drivers who pitted down in 11th and 10th respectively. And well, meanwhile, Empty Dust carrying on, open up a bit more of a gap to Spring Flower, and the 24 driver here really right now seeing whether he's going to be able to keep the distance. But Spring Flower continues to follow, and Nicolator's falling even further back. Nicolator's last lap was 8 tenths slower. Well, unless Nicolator is really running out of steam, there's got to be some sort of strategy involved in this, because otherwise for number 5 driver, this is not the direction he wants the pace to be going in. As meanwhile, into pit lane from 3rd comes Cat Daddy. So, in the end, simply Steve, he could not catch back up to him after Steve got the move done for 2nd place. So Cat Daddy decides, right, it's undercut or nothing now. As he comes now, he's going to split the race into equal halves as well. So a classic strategy here, give himself the best possible car for both stints, rather than a more weighted car for one stint or the other. And well, as Let Me Dust and Spring Flower head on through, Nicolator will as well. This is one of the longest pit stops that we will see over the course of the season in terms of the pit lane end-to-end time. You're on the limiter for a very long time, essentially from leaving the hairpin equivalent of the pit lane all the way through down the pit lane and to the exit of turn number 1 before you come off the pit limiter. So it is a very painful pit stop, and given the fact that Jen and DC spent 57 seconds in the pit lane end to end, well, understandably Cat Daddy will do similar, as Yomega is also in. He comes in from 7th place, but Cat Daddy leaving the pits already. Well, goodness me, that's a very quick pit stop there, because where is Jen? Where is DC? Well, here they are, but that gap right now is very pronounced there. And Cat Daddy in the end, well, a similar stop to Jen in terms of length. In fact, identical, 22.34 seconds to the nearest 100th. But Cat Daddy, by comparison, the best part of a couple of seconds quicker end-to-end in the pit. So a bit more reckless coming in, but he's made it work. So Cat Daddy right now very safe there compared to Jen, who's just making her way through turns 3 and 4. But Cat Daddy's almost to turn number 7 already. Omega leaving the pit lane as he comes on down. And as he does so, well, right now the 3.8 racing driver will emerge the best part of 8 seconds behind DC, but as he rolls his way up the hill, behind him will be simply Steve looking to put a lap on him. Remember, Steve has yet to pit, Knotavin's yet to pit, but he's already a lap ahead, so therefore you will see a few drivers go a lap down, but they will get the lap back when the pit stops are played out, and we'll have to see whether they get lapped at the very end. But as Garlic Dog leaves the pit lane, and gets himself up to speed now, and where he emerges is the best part of 24 seconds behind Omega. As he comes off the throttle there, let Nicolator go. Well, to be fair, did he have to do that? Probably not, but he decided to play it safe. Good awareness there from Garlic Dog, and well, I think deciding that rather than have the blue flags on his back going in towards turn number 2 and then 3 and 4, which is very difficult to give way to a car, and the blue flag rules do state, of course, the fact we're not expecting Formula 1 levels of blue flags, whereby as soon as you are waved a blue flag, you have to get off the racing line and let the lead lap car go through, but the responsibility is to drive predictably responsibly and let the lead lap car overtake you and not put up a fight. But Biker Pilot right now, has he put up a fight so far today? Yes, he has, as he lets Jen go. But Biker Pilot down the pit lane now, and as he does so, well, he makes his way onwards. In fact, that was Knotavin, and we have seen Jen already make her way past, and very shortly we'll see DC head on through. So the second member of the 3.8 racing team in for his mandatory pit stop, and a very fast pit stop for Omega, only 18.1 seconds. I wonder whether perhaps Omega's been doing a lot of fuel saving here in order to be able to try and get some time back on DC over distance. He wants to make sure he's safe for what would be, we believe, that 9th place spot over the course of the race distance. So prioritising points with strategy, a smart move there, and he's definitely bought himself plenty of time on the road. So Mega here, definitely thinking about strategy rather than pace, but to be fair, sometimes that's the way you've got to play the race. And Epi Dust puts a 24.982 in. He's definitely now pushing towards the end of this stint. He's not got long before that fuel tank's going to start running dry here, and I think this is trying to open up as much of a gap over Springflower as humanly possible. Springflower's response for the 25.76, so the gap there opening by the best part of almost 0.8 of a second that time around. Springflower right now is pushing hard to try and respond, but Epi Dust really is pumping in qualifying laps, and Nicolator, by comparison, well, he's matching the pace of Springflower. Now, one of the other things that we don't really talk about in strategy, which, to be fair, is something to be aware of, is the fact that our drivers do have a defined amount of fuel they can put in these cars, but they don't always put all the fuel in at the start of the race. Now, you might be sat there thinking, well, why not, given the fact that surely you want all the fuel to go as long as possible? Well, if you're not planning to go all the way into the full fuel tank, if you're planning to only go, say, halfway through the race, where the full fuel tank would take you 45 minutes, well, the idea being, if you have a lighter car that will get you halfway through the race, therefore you'll be quicker over the opening half of the race because you've got a lighter car to drive around the circuit. You may have more lap time, but the reverse is true in the fact that when you come into the pits, you will have to put more fuel in because you've got to top up what's missing in the tank from when you didn't put it in the car in the first place. So therefore it means a slightly longer pit stop. The trade-off is that you do potentially have a faster stint as a whole to start the race off, and some drivers may have gone for that. Well, it would seem if Epidust has gone for that. I can tell you one thing right now, he's found a way to save fuel and also pump out some very quick laps, so 25.093. Not quite on the pace of Knotavin and Simply Steve, or consistently lapping in the mid-24s. But understandably right now, really the fastest of the rest of them out there, as Jen, meanwhile, at 25.01. So in fact, scratch out what I just said there, Jen right now matching the pace of your third place runner. So Jen could come back into this fight. But remember now, this is a battle being done at distance here. This is all on strategy at this point, and Jen cannot afford to make a mistake. She's just got to keep pumping out those laps one after the other. I'd hope that this is going to pay off, and this is the worst part in the strategic window of a race, whereby you cannot see the driver you are battling with. You may have somebody on the pit wall telling you the gap and telling you whether you're making progress or not, but you don't have the ability to tangibly see what you are racing against. You've got to pray that your strategy, but here when you go for an undercut, you've got to pray it pays off, and you won't know until the car in front finally makes that pit stop, unless they have an incident of some description, and that gains you all the time. So it's into the world of the unknown, as meanwhile a personal best there for Cat Daddy at 23.93. And that's a staggering lap, and Jen, by comparison, 1.2 seconds slower. So, Cat Daddy right now, with Jen closing, has responded, and that gap has reopened from what was 3.8 seconds back up to 4.4 seconds at this point in the lap. So, it does seem as though Cat Daddy right now, knowing there's pressure behind as much as there's pressure in front to try and chase down Simply Steve on strategy. Although Simply Steve at this point with the laps that he's putting in, although his last lap of 25.66, not that impressive a lap to be fair, and Cat Daddy almost gaining a whole 2 seconds on him. Well, that'll be small mistakes, and consistency starts to become a bit of a theme. Indeed, we are still waiting for your top 5 to make their pit stops. So we do show you the number of pit stops on the time tower there, so that way you can stay up to date with who's pitted and who's not. But this race right now, really a bit of a waiting game. It's all about now who's going to flinch and when to make their pit stops. How long can you go? And also, who exactly is right? Is the undercut the right strategy? Is the overcut the right strategy? Or is it pitting right in the middle? Particularly if your name is Cat Daddy. We will see. But we do also see Knotavin here making his way on to another lap, as he's almost to the point of now lapping Jen. But remember, we should give you some context. He is yet to pit. He is proven to be the fastest driver out there. And remember, all he needs to do today is score some points, and he will 100% be your champion-elect going into our season finale. With the absence of TonLo, sadly, it does mean that here today, theoretically, he has wrapped things up, but he'll want that security in knowing that he does pick up one more score at least. And well, it's going to be a winning score at this point, and then that way, if for any reason he should be incredibly naughty in the season finale. Not that he would, to be fair. And I don't think you had the Book of Stewarding thrown at him, and you don't want that thrown at you. It does weigh a ton. Well, I understand Knotavin will have all the points to play with. He's already got 8 scores on the board that do make him almost effective champion, but it'll just be security here today. Coming on down. And right now, this man looking absolutely flawless. As meanwhile, Dust sets the 44, a 24, not a 44. Goodness me, that'd be a terrible lap if it was a 44. A 1 minute 24.698. So puts the personal best on the board. And that, I believe, is in reaction to the pace that is being put together now by the likes of Cat Daddy and Jen. So he's worried about an encroaching presence from behind a long way away, because he'll find his way back to it soon, as we're almost 40 minutes into this race now. And those fuel tanks definitely will be starting to gasp and saying, please feed me more. Springflower further behind, 4 seconds adrift. And he is losing time to Dust. Well, I think Springflower at this point might just now be starting to settle into the fact that over the race distance, he can't quite match up to the Speed Squad driver. But what he can do is be consistent and make sure that Nicolator cannot get close. Now, Nicolator, by comparison, has really lost out over the last couple of laps. And in fact, Nicolator, that last lap, lost another second to both Springflower and to Dust, almost 2 seconds. Has Nicolator got a problem with the car? Because his pace definitely has slid away. He's been lapping in the 26s and the high 25s. I wonder whether there's more fuel saving on or tyre preservation. I wonder if he's perhaps deciding he's going to go the whole distance on a single set of tyres. Although, to be fair, if you can change some tyres in the pit lane, why would you be preserving them that much? But you can feel comfortable on a set of tyres and want to run them all the way to the end. Never say never. But Nicolator's pace right now definitely hitting a little bit of a stopper, unless he's got an ace up his sleeve that nobody, including us in the commentary booth, don't know about. I mean, if he is planning to go for a no-stop strategy, I would be very surprised, just because of the fact that given how early we saw some pit stops, again, the fact that we did see pit stops about 20 minutes into the race, and particularly for none other than Lamp, albeit unfortunately he's had to retire from the race after an incident. Well, understandably, right now, I think the problem is the fact that Nicolator here might just not be quite on the pace anymore. That car went very sideways there coming out of turn number 2, and I think the number 5 really battling uphill, not just because of the nature of the corners, but also the way the lap times are going. But back to Biker Pilot we come, and his battle with Garlic Dog. These two are fighting for position. They have both pitted, so therefore it's now all down to who can get the upper hand on the other on the road. Well, Garlic Dog did manage to take that place for Biker Pilot a little bit earlier on. In fact, there was a bit of an off-track for Biker Pilot that we didn't see, I do believe. And in fact, here's a quick replay to explain what exactly happened to them, ladies and gentlemen. And this was on lap number 23, and this was Biker Pilot at the time, looking in control for 9th place. And, well, as he made his way through turn number 9 into 10, lost the rear of the car, it went sliding to the grass there, and Garlic Dog, meanwhile, then came into the scene of the instant and said, right, thank you very much, I'll pick that one up. So that explains how Garlic Dog got ahead of Biker Pilot. Biker Pilot just carrying a bit too much speed through their hairpin. But back to live racing we come, ladies and gentlemen. As we do come on back, well, now the battle is on the other foot here as Biker Pilot looks to go on the attack. Gets them nice and close as they come down towards the hairpin. And the 3.8 racing driver, well, knowing where they are at the moment, this is going to the battle for the final top 10 spot today. But who exactly is going to take it? Both of them, of course, have been rivals all the way through the season. They've had some brilliant battles. But right now, what's going to be the next chapter in their respective stories? As a bit of a different line there from Garlic Dog, taking a very wide entry line through turn 1. I've never seen that before. I wonder perhaps whether he just turned in a little bit too late, because Biker Pilot siphoned his way through the corner, which is the optimum line perhaps. But right now, the Canadian driver heading up the hill, hitting the curves there. He does love to tap those curbs a little bit with the front of the car. He'll get away with it just about that much, but not more than that. Making the way out of turn number 5, you can see there with the dirty out and the very narrow nature of the opening half of the lap. But right now, your Canadian driver staying in close proximity, as both drivers definitely battling with some tyre wear there through that left handle. Those right hand side tyres definitely starting to show their age, but at least for now, Garlic Dog keeping Biker Pilot at bay. But coming from the onboard there, and well, still waiting on our final 5 pit stops for our leaders as Biker Pilot goes very deep against turns 9 and 10, trying to carry all that speed out the hairpin. In fact, it does work out quite nicely, and looking from the back of Garlic Dog's car at the moment, that gap maybe 4 tenths, but it is coming down very quickly. In fact, Biker Pilot right now, no fear at all for the S's. As Garlic Dog again taking a bit of an unconventional line, making his way between the corners. But I suspect that unconventional line is more just to make sure he's not overloading the tyres. Worried there of tyre wear, as it's going to be very close. A bit of a lock up there from Biker Pilot. Tried to lunge in. It didn't quite work out that time, but you can definitely see right now he's itching to go for a potential move. And it's not going to quite work out as they get ready to go on to another lap. So Garlic Dog just simply holding his line, keeping his metal. That's all you can do here. When the circuit's only too wide at certain points, don't make any mistakes. Make yourself nice and wide in the middle of the road and hold that racing line when you need to. Get the driver behind you to make mistakes. As Biker Pilot does exactly that coming out of turn number 2. So the snap oversteer there loses some time. And right now, if Garlic Dog can keep this up, he may be able to force Biker Pilot to stay behind him for the rest of the race. As we see Jen there, setting a personal best of a 24.201. Right now still chasing after Cat Daddy, who in response delivered a 24.55 on the previous lap. So Jen trying to bring that gap down, but that gap not going anywhere from between 4 to 5 seconds at the moment. It's oscillating, but Jen wants a bit more concrete progress as Knotavin closes closer. The night racing pair together almost, although I suspect with Etmi Dust now into the pit lane, well, that's one of our 5 pit stops that we've been waiting for that comes to fruition, and Etmi Dust now in. Now, has he done enough here to be able to clear Jen, or will he find himself behind Cat Daddy and Jen? Will this be another loss on strategy? Spring Flower, meanwhile, comes in as well, so their fuel tank's going as far as possible. Nicolator's in as well. He was struggling for pace towards the end of the stint, but he's gone long. Can he now find all the pace he was missing going into the second stint? That will be his game plan. Simply Stephen Knotavin going one extra lap. They go a 31st lap by comparison. And so, as Etmi Dust is being searched, car up on the jacks there. To be expected, some tyres will be changed. The same there on the right of your picture for Spring Flower, who now comes into focus. They're going to be changing 2 tyres. It most likely will be those left side tyres taking the change. But where is Cat Daddy? Here he comes as he makes his way onwards. Where's Etmi Dust? He is leaving the pit lane at the moment. There he goes. But Cat Daddy's going to sweep it around the outside of Etmi Dust. Now, where's Jen in all this? I don't think Jen's been able to beat Etmi Dust out the pit lane. No, she is not. There you can see in the rear of the picture. And Etmi Dust back into 4th place. So, effective with Knotavin coming in and Simply Steve surely coming in very shortly. Well, the pit stops will all be complete, ladies and gentlemen, and it does prove that right now Etmi Dust was able to get the jump on Jen, albeit only briefly, because right now he's got to warm those left side tyres up, and Jen on the attack immediately. Knowing she's got warm tyres, she's got to pounce now. She doesn't do this now, and Etmi Dust is allowed to hold line. Well, they're going to squeeze it, choke over turn number 6. Jen's the outside and turn 7. Etmi Dust will go for it on the brakes, but it's not enough. Jen gives the space there just in case, and the night racing drive moves into 4th place. It's an impressive move there from Jen, a vital one as well. Meanwhile, Nicolator and DC are together, and DC and then up the inside Nicolator. Nicolator lose that hand over fist to the man who pitted all the way back on lap number 19. One of the earliest pit stops of the day, although Jen having the earliest one in terms of those on circuit, with Lamp coming in a lap before her on lap 15. She came on lap 16 for context, but right now Nicolator dropping down to 8th place. DC find a way through, but I think it was a small mistake from Nicolator as well, not helping him, plus the cold tyres. But Simply Steve being serviced there leaves the pit lane. He will be well clear of Cat Daddy, who's just making his way out the hairpin now. So that battle for second definitely seems to be sealed and in the favour of Simply Steve, as Knotavin meanwhile already 21 seconds ahead of Simply Steve before the pit stops, and that's how they re-emerge after the pit stops. And with 15 minutes to go, well, now we have it. Your leader is Knotavin. There he is, the night racing driver, looking to make it 9 wins in a row, and on course to do so with only a quarter of the race left. Simply Steve right now in 2nd place, looking to try and bring on home what will be his 4th second place finish of the season, to add to the ones he picked up in rounds 2, 3 and 7, although he was on the podium last time out in round number 8 at Sebring, but it was 3rd place. And then we do a 10-second gap to Cat Daddy, who right now, the plain race cars driver, well, he's been able to pull off the strategy to make sure he stayed ahead of Jen, and Jen meanwhile, well, down in 4th place right now, had to fight with Etmi Dust in order to retain that 4th place, but the night racing driver just about getting it done through the undercut strategy. Etmi Dust did put in some very impressive laps towards the end of his opening stint, but the overcut has not worked out. But can he now come back at the night racing driver? Well, that'll be seen, because by the end of this lap, his 2nd lap after his pit stop, he will have tyre temperature, and then it's all in or nothing for that 4th place. Spring Flower, meanwhile, in 6th place, has dropped behind a bit further, and in fact it has not worked out strategically for the number 93 driver from France, and he's really lost out to the American drivers in front of him. And DC behind the Long Life Motorsport driver into 7th now, found his way ahead of Nicolator, with Nicolator making a bit of an error coming out of the pit lane. But speaking of that, we'll get a replay of that error, plus also Jen's wheel and Etmi Dust very shortly. But just before that, we complete our recap of the running order, because Nicolator, here he is, for Nick Squared, running in 8th place, and well, the first stint started well, but towards the end of it, the pace really started started to drop off. And right now, Nicolator does not look happy at all with the way the car is. I think right now he wants this race to be over sooner rather than later, given the body language of the car coming through the S's. Yo Mega is in 9th and has found his way clear of Garlic Dog and Biker Pilot by pitting a little bit earlier than some. Although Garlic Dog did come in on the same lap as him, Biker Pilot came in a lap later. The 3.8 Racing Drive ahead of the playing race cars machine. There you can see the 199 in the foreground of your camera shot. And then we do have Biker Pilot a little bit further back, the two of them being split there by the car of, I believe, that's Simply Steve. It's but a lap on one and will do so in short order on the other. But Biker Pilot right now running length, having been passed by Garlic Dog and trying to come back in when he can. We have lost 2 drivers of this race. We lost Pancakes in the early stages after a huge jump to the barrier at turn at number 4. The car went spinning out of the right-hander and went to the inside wall and was in pieces, and unfortunately the car could not be repaired. And Lamp as well. A huge incident of his own, unfortunately, albeit we don't know what exactly happened to the car because he came out of turn number 7 and parked it up on the drag strip on the runoff area. So therefore we do believe that perhaps a technical issue with the car, and unfortunately for Lamp, that car has not made its way back out since its trip to the pit lane. He'd already taken his pit stop at that point. He went for the undercut on lap 15. Well, an issue with the car preventing him from going any further come lap number 16. But with that, let's give you a quick recap of the big moments only moments ago, including, of course, that battle between Jen and Epmy Dust for 4th place. Now, this was the brilliant battle between the pair as Jen in the end on warmer tyres, and Epmy Dust still trying to get his tyres warmed up. Jen knew she had to go for it. Squeeze on the inside there, coming through turn number 5 and 6, and then in towards turn number 7 they went. And at that point, Jen had just got clear, and Epmy Dust just not having the grip to go for the counter-attack there. I think if he had warmer tyres, he would have attempted it. But with that, we had this as well for Nicolator and DC together. Now, it does look as though perhaps there'd been a bit of a mistake from Nicolator. Can we go back in time a little bit earlier to see what happened? Yes, we can. And this was Nicolator making his way up the hill after his pit stop. And in fact, very tentative there going through turns 1 and 2. I wonder if there's a technical issue with that car perhaps, or whether he's just really nervous about the heat in those tyres, because either way he changed some tyres in the pit lane and the car twitching there on the switch from turn 3 to 4, and DC just looking up the inside. I think Nicolator, the confidence of the car is just not there at the moment. Ran a little bit wide. Cold tyres can be one part of the reason, no doubt about it. But that twitchiness there through turns 3 and 4, that is not a happy driver at the helm of a Nick Squared car. That is a car right now that definitely does not want to cooperate with its driver. With that, back to live racing we go, ladies and gentlemen. As we do come on back, well, we look to Biker Pilot heading on to another lap. Indeed, right now running in 11th place here, still enjoying himself out there, even if he's the last of our runners. We're trying to put everything together. Knotavin, meanwhile, all the fastest laps keep on coming. A 23.40 to nearest 100th that previous lap. My goodness, the man really right now wants every single point today. He doesn't just want the championship crown for a win. He wants it with the fastest lap in qualifying. He took that, he took pole position. And he wants also the fastest lap in the race. He wants the perfect score. And one second thing, he hasn't had perfect scores every single round. He has had some points taken from him, even though he's taken every win. And those points normally at fastest laps, alternatively even the pole position lap. Losing one of those points, of course, to teammate Jen at Motorsport, who took that incredible pole position lap right towards the end of the session. Although unfortunately didn't quite work out on the opening lap for the night racing number 99, but that's the way it went. But right now, understanding Knotavin here, definitely trying to have all the cherries and the icing on top of his cake when he does take his championship crown at the end of today. As he sets another fast lap of 23.308. I think he needs to realise at the moment, unless he's one of those drivers, to be fair, like many are, where it really is 100% or he can't concentrate. Indeed, there are drivers out there, and the late great Ayrton Senna was one of them, where if you told him to go anything less than 100%, the risk of him making an error suddenly rose. But let's focus on what's on our cameras right now, and this is Epmy Dust back on the attack versus Jen. Well, after Jen put the move on him, Epmy Dust now with full tyre temperature. The Speed Squad drivers trying to say, right, remember me? And Jen's probably saying under her breath, no, I don't want to remember you, as they both brush the wall coming out of turn number 17. A small brush there through the kink of 18, and on to the final 10 minutes they go. Now, as we continue to ride on board with Epmy Dust for this lap, well, of course, at this point, will he be looking for a move? The answer is probably no, but what he will try to do is understand where exactly he can go for a move, and where Jen's going to be stronger, where she's going to be weaker. It does seem as though, at least at the moment, coming through the uphill S's. Jen a little bit deep there for a 3 into 4. And runs a bit wide now. Epmy Dust will surely look up the inside. No, he thought about it and then decided, no, that's going to be a lunge from too far back. And given the amount of time they have, the risk associated with making a move there, would it be worth it if it was the final lap? Yes. If it's currently 5 or 6 laps on the finish, definitely not. In fact, they've probably got a few more laps now given the lap time. Beminos definitely putting that pressure on. He's got to be careful there not to get too enthusiastic himself. Because of course the thing is, once your driver in front starts to make mistakes and goes off the road, you start to be almost hypnotised into making similar mistakes because you're looking so intently at the car in front, you actually forget your brake markers, you forget you need to do your lap properly. Coming out into the hairpin there, which then will open that gap back up. Natural is the way of the ebb and flow of the circuit. You can see here, making his way through the S's right now, really attacking these corners, leaning into his compound in order to be able to take that speed. But of course, fighting with dirty air. Understeers a little bit wide there at turn 16, but corrects it just about. And in the end, they finished lap a little bit further apart than where he started it. But you can see there, Emmett Dust every time trying to V-shape out these hairpins, these tighter corners, to do everything he can to get the better launch onto next straight and go on the attack. But that was an onboard lap there of Emmett Dust. Right now, following closely with Jen, but knowing he's still got to overhaul a couple of attempts before he's really able to make that move or have Jen make an error of some description. And to be fair, we've seen some minor errors from drivers, including Jen only a moment ago, but they are very minor errors. But it is small errors that will be the difference between Jen finishing 4th or 5th, and the same for Etmi Dust. Indeed, it takes 2 to tango, and don't be surprised if Etmi Dust potentially makes an error of his own whilst he's giving chase, getting how hard he's having to push. But that's where the consistency and the flawlessness of these drivers really does get put under the utmost scrutiny as they come down the hill. Around the way on through. Right now, Springflower a little bit further behind. His focus will be on just maintaining 6th place. Here he is, with a 10-second gap over DC, who's gradually dropping Nicolator. Although saying that, the last lap, Nicolator was 8/10 of a second quicker than DC. So, could we see a bit of a revival here for the Nick Square car as it gives chase? Well, if so, perhaps he's finally found out what was not clicking towards the end of the first stint and the start of the second stint beyond the cold tyre temperatures. And, well, the Nick Square machine right now hoping for a last chance at that 7th place. We're 40.8 second gap to Yomega behind. So Nicolator's got no pressure from behind at this point. The only pressure is that in front of him, which he wants to try and chase down. As we make our way back up to the front, Knotavin carrying on. A 23.15, his previous best lap. Almost matching his overall best lap place, 23.05. And right now, I think really he's just enjoying it, putting his laps together. He's really in a happy place. But Jen here under more pressure coming through turn number 2. And she does so well. The car a little bit sideways there coming out of the right-hander. But the iRacing driver who we ride on board and look back from the rear of, definitely right now putting it all together. But you can see Etmi Dust, one small mistake, and suddenly he will be alongside. That's all part of his game plan at this point. He just wants to get involved a little bit more. But as we do see there, Biker Pilot taking an off track in order to be able to let these two go, respecting the blue flags. An honourable sacrifice there from the 3.8 racing driver. We're glued to this battle for 4th place. The closest battle on the circuit. I'm going to stay with it for a bit longer as they get ready to come in towards the turn 9-10 hairpin. Jen going a bit defensive there, middle of the road. I think that's more natural line than needing to go defensive versus Etmi Dust. But perhaps right now, just a little bit nervous about the pressure the 24 is trying to push onto her. And right now, the Speed Squad driver definitely closer this time coming from the S's. 4 attempts, then it's 3 attempts, and really counting a lot of speed there coming in towards turn number 15 and 16. Well, if he's going to go for a move, this is going to be it because he gets ready for the hairpin here. 1.5 attempts is the gap. Jen goes defensive. Etmi Dust looks to the outside, and this is all now about getting good traction out the corner. Jen tries to park it on the apex, and as a result, that means Etmi Dust here now has even better run heading onto the start-finish straight. 2 attempts as they go towards the time line. 5 minutes left on the clock. Our leader is already halfway through the next lap, so I suspect we've got this lap plus another 3 more to go. But Jen right now under absolutely horrendous pressure here from Etmi Dust for 4th place. And well, definitely a first podium of the season is going to have to wait for Jen until perhaps what will be Road America in our season finale in a week's time. But right now, Etmi Dust here definitely wants to steal away that 4th place and gain some more points in a very tight run for the top 5 of the Drivers' Championship. Number 24 driver here, he's really come through the ranks. Started 10th today, is qualifying once again. Really his weakest aspect to his season. The fact that his qualifying points have been very hit or miss. Normally more misses in the second half of the season. But right now, in the race, he has been absolutely faultless in his ability to pick up places. But it always raises the question, does it not? If he'd been able to qualify better, would he be chasing the podium more often? And some would say definitely yes. And that's one of those what-if questions. And right now, we have to deal with the certainties that are presented to us. And the fact of the matter is, chasing 4th, he's in the fight. Cat Daddy is 3 seconds up the road and is actually being caught up to by this pair very gradually. So therefore, I think Cat Daddy will be hoping if he's looking at his relative box inside the cockpit, he'll be hoping that those two will fight each other more, because look how close they are on the same picture now. And, well, that is not a happy omen there for Cat Daddy, in the fact that third place could be at risk right at the end, albeit Garlic Dog right now will experience having a lap put on him by these two, as the line is narrowed there through turn number 18 on towards the next lap. But Garlic Dog doing everything he can to steer clear, and indeed he couldn't have done any better than that, to be fair. Well, as the drivers head on to lap number 40. But right now, Emmy Dust again very close. Jen has a poor run this time, coming out of turn number 2, but Emmy Dust can't get to the outside of 3. We've seen drivers go outside to inside, but now going defensive. Jen there completely offline. Emmy Dust getting into the head of the night racing driver, looks up the inside of 5. It's going to be a small squeeze on the nose there, and Emmy Dust opens up the door. Jen gives him the space, but now through turn 6 into 7, and as they come all the way around, Jen's just got to hold the inside line here, surely, mate. Emmy Dust go all the way round. He's going to try it. He's going to have no road to use there. The car will naturally understeer wide. Jen goes a little bit deep. Emmy Dust on the inside. They touch paint, but then they survive it. Lovely racing between the two of them. But can Jen get back on the inside now into turn number 9? She's going to go all in for it. Look for it on the brakes. Emmy Dust covers her off, and Emmy Dust will take that 4th place. As Jen in the end now has to sit behind just a little bit longer, and Emmy Dust there with an absolutely brave move. But to be fair, respect was shown between both drivers in absolute spades. It was brilliant racing between them, and you couldn't have asked for a more daring move from Emmy Dust for 4th place. But Jen being as fair as possible, both drivers there running it right on the limit, and that's what it's all about. And Emmy Dust takes 4th, and the Speed Squad driver right now will try and bolt away and already open up a 7/10 of a second gap. I think the question was when it was going to happen, not if it could happen, and Emmy Dust making it a reality in the end, but having to do so with Jen putting up an absolutely valiant fight. Nicolator meanwhile is caught up to DC. We thought this was coming, and now Nicolator is all over the back of DC for 7th place. So the Bong Life Motorsport driver has one last hurdle to overcome before he's able to finish this race with a good clutch of points. But can he take those points home? Nicolator right now wants them back as Biker Pilot into pit lane. I believe perhaps a quick splash and dash of fuel or alternative drive-through penalty, but either way, Nicolator gets a much better run out the hairpin there. He's going to go round the outside of DC. In towards turn number 1. There'll be 2 wide here going up the hill in towards turn number 2. Now will Nicolator back out? Does he have to back out here? He's trying not to, but unfortunately the wider line on entry into turn 2. Well, that means he's now still side by side because DC had a shorter run up the hill. DC will take that 7th place back there, so Nicolator goes for it, but it doesn't quite work out. Looking down over the front end of the number 5 Nick Squared now. Well, it's going to be turn 5 here, where he's not going to be able to carry on the attack. He's going to have to wait just that little bit longer, but we're on his way in towards turn number 7. This could be an opportunity here. He's going to go to race in line. DC goes defensive, so Nicolator getting into his head, and DC goes very deep there. Nicolator gets a really nice slingshot out the corner. Picks up the toe as well onto the drag strip, and now the door's open there. DC can't cover it off at this point, and Nicolator thinks about it, but in the end breaks a little bit earlier. Doesn't have quite the brakes by comparison, but he will get an inside line into 10. But DC goes to rejoin, but he has to let some space to Nicolator, and the two of them reset. They go once again there. Both drivers being a little bit courteous to each other. You can see it was a bit of an after me, after you, sir moment. And well, now as DC holds that 7th place, well, it's going to be Nicolator has one more shot at it. In fact, we have 2 more shots because our leader of Knotavin has just made his way out to turn number 10. So I think we will get a 43rd lap, indeed, as they make the way on through. So this is going to be, they're on lap number 41 right now. They've got 2 more laps after this one. They won't go a lap down before this race is over. But what they'll definitely see is 2 more chances for Nicolator. And DC right now will probably be saying to himself, when is this race going to be over? I can't surely hold on for this long. Well, he's going to have to. As they head up the rise again, Nicolator closed. But this time going in towards turn number 2, cannot get alongside. So instead now what he's going to have to do is just hold on to his pride for a little bit and think, right, where's the opportunity going to come? As DCM makes his way over the crest. We'll look back from the rear of your number 3, the Bong Life Motorsport driver there. Not wilting under the pressure into turn number 5. And I think what he's noticed since what happened at turn number 9 is the fact that Nicolator cannot be as late on the brakes because he doesn't have as much rear end grip on the car. I think it's that rear wing that's missing, which means that right now Nicolator does have to stop the car just a little bit earlier under braking. Naturally have to do so anyway on inside lines when he tries to attack, but even we saw there coming down towards the hairpin, Nicolator definitely letting the place go. And I think Nicolator's strategy is to try and get DC to make a mistake, try to pressure himself into an error. But the thing is, when you are the lead car, if you notice that your rival is trying to pressure you into an error and is not actually trying to make a move or lunge up the inside, you can actually turn that around mentally and suddenly go on the tack to the clock strike 0, which means we are at our final lap of lap 43. You can suddenly simply just say to him, well, you're going to have to dive for it now. The door's open if you dare. But of course, not through here as they come through turn 16. It's a good run from Nicolator, and DC goes defensive there coming towards the hairpin, and now he's got to really build up this exit here. Nicolator right now can't go too soon either, otherwise he'll be queuing up behind the car in front of him, but they're practically even as they make the way onto their last tour of the circuit. But as they do, well, from then, ladies and gentlemen, we must come back to your leader, because the white flag was waving, but now it'll be a checker flag waving. And for this man, he's going to make it 9 in a row. But for Knotavin, he becomes your champion-elect for Season 12, the LMP2 edition of the Just 2 Idiots Championship Series. A flawless win, pole position and fastest lap. It is the cherry on top, and coming home in second place in due time will be Simply Steve. But for Knotavin right now, it is a champion crown that will await him at Sebring. Meanwhile, Omega battling hard with Garlic Dog as they fight the way coming through turns 9 and 10. But we must come away from them to see Simply Steve coming home run up today, taking his 4th second place of the season for Speed Squad. And what a brilliant drive, but not able to answer the responses of Knotavin. As meanwhile, we have a bit of time, but who will finish third? It is going to be Cat Daddy in the end. Emmy Ducks got within 2 seconds, but we do see the playing race cars try and make his way back onto the podium that escaped him at Sebring last time out, but he gets it done. Emmy Ducks comes on home in 4th place there for Speed Squad. It's a double top 5 for the team, a huge points injection. And then Springflower is going to come on home in 5th place here. What's happened to Jen right at the end? Because Jen was running happily 5th. Springflower will take a top 5 here. Brilliant work from him. Where's Jen? Jen's run out of fuel. Surely not. Surely she's not going to fall short of the finish line. She's almost there. This is absolutely gut-wrenching. And DC and Nicolator, they're coming up to fight. They're going to find that car. Oh my good lord! And in the end, it's going to be, I think, DC just about takes 6th place. Nicolator knocking Jen on the rear, and I don't think he knew what was going on. I don't think any yellow flags were waving, and Jen in the end gets knocked across the finish line in 8th place, with Omega and Garlic Dog finishing a lap down. And Omega taking that 9th place of a Garlic Dog, and Biker Pilot 2 laps down. But goodness me, what end to the race, ladies and gentlemen. An incredible end. But as Knotavin calls them down, well, he's not cooling down before he celebrates here. And, well, let the man rejoice, I say, because he is your champion effectively, subject to any stewards' inquiries for this season. And he's done it with a perfect run of victories. And some would say, well, TonLo wasn't here today, but to be fair, he did have a lot of pressure in qualifying from Simply Steve, and in the race, he just stepped away from everybody else who could not keep up with him. And his consistency plus his pace have been in equal measure absolutely faultless to a T. And that's why he is your champion-elect for Season 12, the LMP2 season of the Just 2 Idiots Championship Series. And getting it done here today at Sonoma with a round to spare before we do head to none other than Road America for what will be our Crown Jewel event. But as Cat Daddy celebrates taking his spot on the podium today, he's absolutely ecstatic about that. It's been some time since he's been on the podium. Indeed, the last time he took a podium was in round number 3. He was third place there, so it's only his 2nd podium of the season. He's come so close so many times. Well, he's enjoying that moment. But with that, we need to take a quick look back at some big moments from what was the end of the race, including, of course, Garlic Dog and Omega battling each other. This was on their final laps. Remember, they finished a lap down, and this was just after, I do believe, Jen had been able to get ahead of them, but Jen was running low on fuel, and this was Garlic Dog up the inside of Omega, so Omega did not see that coming. So how did Omega come back at him in the end to take the place? And, well, the way he got it done was this. He picked up more momentum kind of out of 8 into 9, as Jen had to let them both go to save the fuel, and looked around the outside here. Not normally a way you get it done, but in the end, he went for it here. Garlic Dog respected the fact he was there, and they almost touched turn number 10. A little bit of contentious moment in terms of whether Garlic Dog was squeezed on the apex or whether Omega gave him the space, but either way, he was brave, and Omega got it done there for 3.8 Racing. Definitely a daring move, but sometimes you've got to dream and dare to believe it can be made possible. But we also did have this, of course, from Nicolator versus DC, this ending, which, to be fair, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, you couldn't make this up. This was Springflower, firstly, going on through, and very shortly you will see there's Jen crawling towards the finish, unfortunately due to fuel running out. But then DC and Nicolator, they were not too far behind as they were battling their way through the S sequence. DC was ahead, but Nicolator was always getting closer and closer, and, well, the gap at this point was 2 tenths here, but Nicolator's going to get a huge run off of the right-hander of turn number 16. Into 17 he went, and we'll look around the outside. DC going as defensive as humanly possible here, parks the car up. Nicolator gets the switch back there, and we've got the momentum, but the problem is Nicolator's not going to see until he comes through this corner that Jen's car is crawling, and he found a bit of space there, biffed the wall, but unfortunately DC on the safer line took that 6th place, and Nicolator, well, it could have been far, far worse. That was a very scary boat for all involved, but in the end they did survive it, and DC ahead of Nicolator and Jen for 6th, 7th and 8th. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's make our way back to your live pictures from circuit side and bring you those race results subject to any stewards' inquiries. And as we do come back, well, indeed, our time here at Sonoma has come to a halt in terms of the racing action, but what a race it has been. And here are said results. And as we can see, for round number 9, the Steve's Super Sonoma Special, here at the Sonoma Raceway in the US state of California, Knotavin making it a 9th win in 9 rounds. And with it, the champion-elect status goes to him as he heads to our season finale. The Canadian driver, 27.5 seconds clear of Speed Squad's Simply Steve. And Simply Steve, to be fair, put some pressure on Knotavin early on, but the pressure was on him to hold second, and then he did so and ran away with it. Third place, Cat Daddy in getting the upper hand versus Dust, Jen, and also Springflower and DC and Nicolator over the distance, and a very well-earned podium there by the best part of what was 2 seconds of playing racing cars drivers over Speed Squad, who in the end saw Dust take 4th place, but he hustled as much as he possibly could, but it wasn't enough there to beat Cat Daddy, but he was able to take that 4th place ahead of a very competitive field. Springflower came home in 5th place there, the privateer, and in the end being rewarded for his consistency with a 6th place that was converted to a 5th place when Jen ran out of fuel, and DC inheriting that 6th place of Long Life Motorsport from Jen, but did very well to hold off Nicolator all the way to the very end. Nicolator, a huge near miss at the finish line, took 7th for Nick Squared, with his struggles midway through the race, giving way in the end to some more success, but you will be wondering what exactly was going wrong at the end of the first stint, and why the start of his second stint was so difficult compared to for others. But he still finished ahead of Jen, who in the end was pushed across the finish line for Night Racing in 8th place, and was your last lead lap finisher. It was a lap down to Yo Omega for 3.8 Racing, who took on Garlic Dog right at the end in their race-long battle and brought home the 9th place of the playing race cars driver. And it was 2 laps down, but still a points finish there for 3.8 Racing's Biker Pilot, and the 3.8 team definitely picking up some huge points today, as their season-long battle with the likes of playing race cars will carry on all the way in the team's championship to the season finale. We sadly did lose along the way. Lamp, the privateer, made his debut today, but due to a technical issue with the car, had to retire 29 laps in the end, and we saw an early shunts to barrier at turn number 4 on the second lap for Pancakes, and the SimCity Racing driver unfortunately not able to see the race through to the conclusion. So 13 starters, 11 finishers, of which 8 on the lead lap, and a race full of excitement from start to finish, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why it is called Steve's Super Sonoma Special, because it definitely has been a super special race today. But with that, all the racing is complete, and it is sadly time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now wanting to know more about the Just 2 Idiots Championship Series, the J2ICS as it's abbreviated to, we do recommend you check out our official website firstly, and that's at www.j2ics.com. That website appearing on screen now, and it is indeed the home of all things J2ICS, and if you want any information, if you want to know how to get on the grid, alternatively the rules and regulations, or just what's happened in previous seasons, we do strongly recommend you go to our website. It is a brilliant source of information, and laid out absolutely lovely as well, and you can't go wrong on our official website. But of course, if you do want to get to the beating heart of the community, we do recommend you join the official Discord. Invite link available on screen, and indeed, whether you're an esports professional all the way through to a rookie racer, we'll be very happy to have you join the grid, whether it's for this season or seasons ahead, and there's never been a better time to become part of a growing community hosted in North America, but indeed open to anybody around the globe, and indeed, our official Discord definitely the beaten up. You can speak to the drivers, the staff, and the admin members. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our penultimate round of the season. And next time out, we are bringing the curtain down as we make our way to the US state of Wisconsin. And it's going to be the Countryside Classic Circuit of Road America, which will see our drivers charge their way around Elkhart Lake in a crown jewel round. And it'll be 90 minutes to conclude the championship. And all the racing will occur on Wednesday, the 22nd of April, 2026. But we invite you to come join us if it were live on Thursday, the 23rd of April. And what we'll see there is that Knotavin will try to go for 10 for 10, as he is already our champion-elect, and therefore he's guaranteed to be champion barring any exceptional circumstances, and he'll be just looking to see whether he can end the season on a perfect score, with regards to victories at least. But the big question will be, who will end up finishing second in the championship? And indeed, if we see TonLo return to the racing, well, definitely he'll find himself in very close company with the likes of Cat Daddy, Dust, Simply Steve, to name a few. So it's all still to play for the runner-up spots in terms of second and third, and whilst our championship is all complete at the very top at least, well, there's still plenty to watch out for at Road America. But until then, we've been Just 2 Idiots Championship Series, and alongside it, the Just 2 Idiots Cup Series as well. I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh. You've been tuning into a Paul Walsh production, and until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, as always, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay on track. Good night.